Welcome one and all here to Carey Stadium in Fort Washington, Pennsylvania on this beautiful and hot and windy Saturday in the month of May. The Philadelphia Spinners 5-1 and the DC Current 2-4 as the Current visiting the Spinners here in Pennsylvania today. The number one team in the conference are the Spinners with the Boston Whitecaps right behind them at 5-1. The Current, meanwhile, being 2-4, need a victory here today. And they have an uphill battle not only against the Spinners, but also against the weather. 87 degrees. And while that may say 8 miles per hour, it's been as high as 17 in pregame, Dusty.
I think this is going to be kind of the nicest weather that both these teams have played against in terms of the temperature and the sheer amount of sunshine. But the wind today, the variability is going to be key. It's going to change during some points and be stronger. During the rest of the time, it's going to be a little bit weaker, and they should be able to work up pretty well.
And we will have the opening pull, and we'll have some players to watch and keys of the game coming up in a second here on MLU Live.
That was an incredible game to watch.
It was a huge loss.
I just decided to launch and try to get it.
I knew if I went up early enough, I could get it.
And all of a sudden, there are feet kind of above heads.
Does it all come back to this loss? Does it all come back to this play?
If I had four hands, I would put all four hands on the ball.
It was up the other line. They had to deliver.
Boston kept doing this thing that you didn't think was possible.
Welcome back here to Carey Stadium. The DC Current playing the Philadelphia Spinners here in Pennsylvania. 5-1, the Spinners come in, and the Current need a win today to stay alive in postseason contention. And right at the moment, we have the opportunity of being joined with one of the Current in Eric Salmi as we head down to field level, where we assume it's just as hot as windy. Eric, pretty hot down there too?
It's the warmest it's been all season. You know, when it's been 50 and rainy for most of the season, anything above that's going to feel warm.
So have you guys prepared specifically for the weather, or are you just going to approach it like any other day?
We've been drinking a lot of extra water, I think. You know, Thursday in D.C. was a little bit warmer, but, you know, there's only so much you can do to simulate heat.
And so you've been on a 2-game winning streak. How do you think that's set you up to compete in this game for playoff contention today?
Going into the season, I think we knew with a lot of new guys, a lot of guys getting up in the pro game, as well as guys in new roles like myself, we always knew the second half of the season was when we were hoping to hit our stride. And, you know, you always know you got to win games. If you lose a few in the beginning, just win them late.
And unfortunately today, you're going to be without one of your key handlers, Lloyd Blake, on the offense. Are there any specific adjustments you've made?
No, you know, Lloyd, it's hard to replace a guy like Lloyd. He's had a great season to start. I think our offense, though, has been always tuned about a lot of fast movement, and, you know, that's our goal today, is just to keep it moving with easy throws. None of us are going to try to do too much to replace Lloyd. You can't do that, but I think we have a lot of faith in our cutters. Our handlers know we can get him the disc, and we're going to score on that.
And we'll get you out of here on this. What do you expect to see from your team today facing playoff elimination?
A lot of hunger. Thursday's practice was very physical. We were beating each other up. We were running hard. We were laying out. We were yelling. We were arguing. You know, you get to the point in the season when people stop being nice, and, you know, that's once you know you've got a team.
Thanks so much for your time. It looks like we're getting pretty ready to go here, and we hope to see a great contest today. It sounds like you guys are well prepared.
Yeah, we're ready.
Again,
Thank you, guys.
That was Eric Salmi of the DC Current, and he will be getting major minutes today. Well, he always does, but he'll be seeing the disc a lot more today, Dusty, with Lloyd Blake on the men.
Yeah, and as he talked about, they're trying not to do too much individually because you can't replace an individual player like Blake with one person or one strategy. But if they share the burden a little bit, they'll be much more set up for that. One of the key pieces to that is going to be Delrico Johnson today. He's moved over to the offense this season. He's no longer new out there. You can see that he's scored 16 goals, 8 assists, 8 blocks, 78.3% passer. So he's a little bit low on his passing completion rate, but the key is with those 8 blocks, he gets the disc back after DC makes an error.
Delrico Johnson does have the team lead for the Current in goals and blocks, and second, of course, to Lloyd Blake in assists. For Philadelphia, the player to watch on their side is Greg Martin. He had a big game, 4 goals in their first matchup in week 2, but that's a long way away, but still he's played well. Could be Philly's 3rd straight Rookie of the Year.
And the key for Martin is that he makes negative plays into positive plays. If the disc is sitting up for Philadelphia or DC, Greg Martin is one of the players who's going to go up there and take it out of the sky and bring it back for the Spinners.
And of course, Greg Martin does lead the East with 10 break goals. Ethan Peck usually the man to throw those goals.
We should expect to see a lot of them today. I expect there to be a decent number of turnovers today, kind of unforced errors as well as forced errors. So we should see a lot of Peck, we should see a lot of Martin with the disc in their hands, and we'll see if DC can get it back from them.
Well, we'll be seeing everything coming up as the opening pull just about getting underway. And we will be right back for the opening pull in just a sec. Here at beautiful Cary Stadium in Fort Washington, Pennsylvania, for Eastern Conference action in the MLU. Thanks for joining us, Dan Hilton and Dusty Rhodes on MLU Live week number 8 as we get set for the opening pull. As of course, the format, as you know, we're 8 weeks in, 10 minutes in 4 quarters. And the Philadelphia Spinners 5-1 on the season. The DC Current without their lead point man in Lloyd Blake, as they let off the opening pull, and Philadelphia starting left to right on the offense.
It'll be exciting to see what DC comes out with to start. It looks like they're just in a man defense, and Philadelphia's in a side stack.
So here's Hironette to David Brandoff. Brandoff looking at the huck deep to Billy Sickles, a former Rookie of the Year. And Sickles starts this off. Good box out, and the score for Philadelphia.
And that sort of play where Brandoff comes out of the stack, takes the disc on his own, and puts it up to Sickles is the sort of thing where Philadelphia is attempting to establish the deep game early. This wasn't a perfect throw, and you can see the defender had an opportunity to get there, but the aggression and the ability to create space around Sickles is what originally made him one of the players of the year last year, the Rookie of the Year, in fact, not just a player of the year. And
Dusty, the wind you can see already taking effect as well. With the wind not really necessarily going in any certain direction, just swirling around. I think you saw that Brandoff hesitated for a moment, saw which way the wind was going, and knew that he had a throw with the wind, and that it would stay up just long enough for Sickles to run onto it.
Yeah, it's interesting. He throws very well in the wind. He has good edge control on most of his throws, but the ability to put it out there and make sure that it came back onto the field with most of the wind coming toward us from the camera angle, should be interesting to see how DC deals with this on their first point.
And on that pull by Esser, the wind pushing it down, as here we have the man we interviewed in Salmi from pregame. Over to Freund. You see that's the wind really just helping that disc float up. Salmi on the doorstep, looks off Norbum. Back to Norbum, Salmi working in the end zone, and an easy answer by DC. Khalifa gets the score. It's now 1-1. Just still under a minute to go, so fast-paced action so far.
And that's very much perfectly encapsulates what Kyle Khalifa does on offense, is he finds a little bit of space, knows that the thrower is looking to throw a goal, and creates timing for the offense to get there easily. The way that Norbom was looking, he was kind of on that tight sideline, And the ability to get open in a very small space and create enough space for that lefty backhand, that's critical. That's how Khalifa has scored so many goals this season.
And Dusty, due to the wind pushing down that pull, you only have a short field. It's only 50, 60 yards. So again, a break could be very, very important going at this point upwind, though the wind, of course, will change.
Yeah, I think what we're going to see on the pulls is a lot of variance. We're going to see some short pulls, but we're going to see a couple pulls that these players really get a hold of and put deep down the field. Those are the moments where you're going to look for those turnovers. See Griezmann on the pull here.
Trevor Griezmann, of course, from Dickinson College in his first season with the Current. It's going to land. It looks like Brandoff will pick it up again. He already has an assist to Billy Sickles on the first point of the game and the first point for the Spinners. Brandoff up to Meta. Himalaya Meta looking up line and just again gliding 15 feet and looks like there for the D.
Antoine Davis on the D there. He was reading that play the whole time. He was kind of setting up Glazer to run towards the short side of the field, and then once Roman put the disc up, Davis closed on it immediately. This will be the first break opportunity, but they're going kind of upwind here.
So just trying to get it away from the end line, and they do. Crossfield pass, working to great effect. And now they're going to loft the disc up there. Meta might have a defensive play on it, but getting to it in time was Griezmann.
That was a really fortunate result for the DC Current. I know they were trying to get it to the other side of the field. I'm not sure that was exactly where they were trying to get it to.
So looking for the break opportunity as we spoke about. The defensive line from the DC Current. Griezmann, the handoff to Bartenstein. Bartenstein puts it up in the back of the end zone and easily coming with it on the other side. The man number 17, Eric Miner.
That throw there was very important because it shows the Spinners that the Current are ready to put it up to the other side. Miner wasn't even necessarily cutting for this throw, but there was so much space over there, and the Philadelphia players were so far over on the strong side of the field that space was open, and all he had to do was sit the forehand out there. The wind can be tricky with that, can play with it a little, but the confidence shown by DC right now, that's what we're looking to see, and that's exactly what Salmi was talking about in the pregame.
And of course, DC, we keep reiterating it, they're without Lloyd Blake, and they're going to have to win this without Lloyd Blake if they want to make the postseason, because of course with Boston and Philadelphia, and Boston, we'll talk about them plenty today, and though they're not here, they're not in the matchup, of course they have to be on the minds of the Philadelphia Spinners, who again share the same record, and for the DC Current, that's the team they want to try to reach to knock out.
Yeah, the Boston Whitecaps are on the minds of everyone on the East. They've beaten the one team from the West that they've faced, and they've done very well against everyone from the East.
And, of course, they are the 2015 champions. Bryant, the handoff to David Shields. Shields looking dump.
And
back to Brad.
And we see Philadelphia here with most of their defensive line out here. And that is going to be way too far.
And Ethan Peck, you see, he seemed to be off balance with the huck there. He just stepped out a little bit too much.
And he threw it so low that there was no chance for it to float and have the receiver make a play on it.
Michael Panna on the defense. Now here's Peck. So DC could potentially start this game with 2 breaks after going 1-1.
It'll be interesting to see how Philadelphia responds here. If DC can work the disc up and maintain possession, Philly will be put in a tough spot.
As Shields was there, and he might have been able to cut off the angle anyway. So DC give it right back, and so for the Spinners, you have to assume that while this isn't the same team from years past, this is a team that still knows how to take care of the disc.
Yeah.
And there's Esser.
If you're going to float a pass up near somebody, Esser's the right choice.
Picking it up, and there's Peck right in the center of the field again. Back to Panna. Panna, they pick up the yards in the middle of the field. Now Esser. Now 1 throw away. And maybe 2 in the wind as it starts to pick up. Panna not expecting the disc, able to come down with it on the strike cut. Now Panna goes to Peck. Peck easily in the end zone for the score. So Philadelphia gifted the Current the disc, but they get it right back and they get the score 2-2. 7 minutes to play in the first quarter.
It's a bit of a wasted opportunity on DC's part. They got it all the way up the field, but they didn't manage to create a catchable disc, which is what Philadelphia did on their very first possession. Both those throws were so low, trying to make up for the wind, that they were uncatchable. Too much power behind them. But here, once Philadelphia got their second possession, there was enough space that they were able to attack very calmly. There was not much pressure on the second possession. That's in part because often when you're on the D-line and you get your first opportunity to score, you give all of your energy to that. So when this offense gets their second possession, you're lagging behind a little bit. So Philadelphia did a great job taking advantage there. Now I think we're going to see kind of a second defensive line from Philly up against the first O-line from DC.
Well, that first defensive line, Ethan Peck, you could see him having words with 29-year-old first-year head coach Daryl Stanley on the sideline. Of course, Peck, though, is top 5 in the league in break throw assists. That time he was on the receiving end. So here's Norbum on the other side as the Current moving right to left. Again, this would be just a hold. They have the one break they might have needed, and now the Spinners forcing those throws, and again, not really necessarily playing man-to-man, playing a little more zonal.
Yeah, they're dropping off somebody very deep to begin with in each one of these points so far. I'm not sure that's totally necessary in this wind, but they're ensuring that DC doesn't get easy options. And that's a terrible turnover at the moment. It looks like he thinks he was fouled. No call.
And so throwing it back and picking it up are the Spinners. Spinners almost gave it right back, but Shields, with a quick right hand, pulled the disc in.
I thought Norbum should have given a little more effort to that play.
Back to Shields, and Norbum looking for his man. They get it into Dunn in the middle of the field. Now easy one pass. Here's Youngblood. Youngblood looking for the man, cutting in the middle. And with the D, finishing it up and catching it himself. But it looks like he's down with an injury.
That'll be rough. It looks like he cramped up in the hamstring there. He's grabbing back. It may be a pull or something like that. We'll find out eventually.
And that is Joe Frayne.
The real question here is what's going to happen with the possession. So he caught the disc and then put it down. It depends on where the refs call the injury is happening. Last week we saw between the New York Rumble and the DC Current, we saw a player call an injury on himself and put the disc down, but there was no official stoppage. So the turnover happened and DC got the disc back. We'll see what happens here and how the refs call this one.
And he does seem a little shaken up, so the players will have time to congregate. And the one thing we have to mention, he hasn't played in too many points yet so far, but Delrico Johnson is a name we haven't gotten to say yet for the DC Current. And while it is 2-2, they got their break without him. You still got to expect that he might have a larger part of possession here. And so, due to the injury, we will take a quick break and be right back here on MLU Live. Back at Carey Stadium, and so the DC Current came into this one without Lloyd Blake, and now they're out another starter here. It looks like Joe Frayne getting helped off the field, but the DC Current, it looks like the officials saying they will still have the disc, it appears.
It looks more like Philadelphia was given the disc, and Sickles chose to give it back to DC. I think that's the perfect choice. You don't necessarily need the refs to control it. The players can be in charge of that.
And that's a lot of good karma that Philadelphia might be creating for themselves as well.
I'm not sure it's quite so cynical as that, but it could be depending on how you're trying to play this game, whether you're trying to curry good favor with your opponent or just generally with the universe. I'm not sure what the exact call here was. It may not have started on time, but DC's going back 5 yards into the end zone, maybe
it
a
looks
travel.
like it was on Flores, actually downfield is what it appeared to be the call. That's why they moved Norbum back as well. And so the officials continuing to just move Norbum back towards the end zone.
Yeah. I missed this call as well.
And again, every time that the Current are moved back, it gets even more difficult because, of course, the handler defense for the Spinners is so good. So Norbum just making a 50-50 play, and Dunn and Delrico Johnson. Dunn is the one who gets down to it, and what a good foot race there.
Nice kick block there from Khalifa, but Dunn was one of the few people I've seen outrace Delrico Johnson on just a flat race, just a foot race. It was very close,
but
Dunn
got 50 or 60 yards, that run. So Salmi has it here on the near side. Norbum trying to make the strike cut. He gets free from Sickles. Norbum thought about putting it into the end zone. Instead, now waiting for Khalifa. Khalifa tried to go right back to Norbum. They bring the double team, and beautifully splitting the double team was Khalifa, and the referees say it's a goal. 3-2.
And there you can see the play that Khalifa and Norbum have, the connection that the two of those players have together. They tend to know exactly where the other player is going. They managed to split a double team there, ran a little give-go, and Norbum's shoelace catch was way more difficult than he made it look. It helps when you're short. You don't have quite as far to go down, but not to undermine what he did there to make DC get that possession, convert it into a goal.
And while it's not an official category, or we'll say award at the end of the season, would you say that Kyle Khalifa could be one of the most improved players this season that we've seen?
I think he's been playing very well all season long, and he's giving a good race for either Rookie of the Year, Most Improved Player, anything along those lines. He's done an excellent job all season. He was a surprise to me. I didn't know exactly what his skill set was coming into this season, but his timing is impeccable.
And while he is in his second year, of course, Himalaya Meta is another one of those players that have really surprised people and been a fun player to talk about throughout the course of the year.
And while he's not putting up the same stats he has been, he's still a key component of this Philadelphia offense. He has speed that few other players can match and the height to pressure people deep as well.
It looks like the disc did land inbounds, just about a foot off the end line, so Meta will be the deepest cut, and so Pana will be the first cut. Setting up in that stack and now trying to get it off the line.
It's interesting, Philadelphia set up their offense with a side stack on the same side as the field there. It didn't really give them any downfield options to start, but they've worked out of it here.
And that's Hironet, Katzenbach. They know how to work out of most things. Though Hironet and Katzenbach haven't scored or assisted on as many points as you think this season, as Meta just unable to get to it. And Katzenbach, it looked like that pass might have been intended for Katzenbach, and so Meta...
I agree. I think Meta was trying to play clean up there. Yeah, Hironet was a little too hopeful with that pass, but that's what you do when you trust your receivers.
Davis, nice 10-yard pass on the near side. Not falling for those handler fakes by Griezmann. They center into the field for Minor.
DC's not phased by the wind right here. They're running a very competent offense.
And Davis again. Get it back to the middle for Salmi. Salmi over the head of Jackson, and it looks like Tim Jackson might have lost his footing a little bit. Pana was a few steps behind him, and that just floated as well.
Yeah,
just a tad.
Jackson was really very open, and Salmi failed to deliver a perfect pass. It was on time, but it was not on target. Jackson did his best to get there. Didn't manage to.
Dave Bear centers in for Pana. Now Pana looking dump to Hironet. Hironet in his own end zone. It looks like we might have a pick called. And indeed it was a pick called. You had to wonder why Vince Radams found himself so wide open in the middle of the field. The call came right afterwards.
He is head and shoulders above the man covering him, though, so that's going to be a tough matchup for number 6, Aaron Richards there.
Meta upfield. Davis tried to get the block, but instead tracking it down was Glazer. Glazer up to Pana. Now Pana, Katzenbach runs on, is able to toe the line. Taps it right back in. Meta trying to make the cut in the end line.
Chip Cobb doing a very good job on defense there to catch up with Meta, give him enough body that he wasn't able to get open for Katzenbach. Katzenbach calls the timeout. He's one of the players who does that most frequently, just when the play is still live.
And especially when they're down by 1 early, they know they have time, they have the composure, and at 2:20, we'll step aside and be right back in just a moment here on MLU Live. Back on a windy and hot Saturday in May. Emphasis on the windy, emphasis on the hot, as wind again continues to play a factor in this one. For the defense, we looked on that last play why Katzenbach called the timeout for Philadelphia, that Meta's man was able to come in on him, and with the wind really going everywhere, Katzenbach chose, again, just to reset the disc, take your time instead of forcing a throw into the wind.
Yeah, his only actual option to throw to Meta there would have been sort of a cross-field floating throw, and the rest of the offense wasn't in position yet where he could rely on anything sort of within their standard offense. If a single player had gotten down there and managed to get open, managed to provide him something easier, he may not have needed to call that timeout, but probably the safe decision right now. And as you mentioned, Philadelphia needs this goal.
And I do want to go back a few plays earlier in this point when Philadelphia picks up the disc on the side of the field, and they start with a side stack right next to where the disc is picked up. Why would a team do that?
It feels like the sort of thing that they're using as a misdirection, which is something that they do frequently off of their pull plays, but it just didn't provide an early option, and the thrower wasn't immediately looking to swing the disc, which is kind of an unusual combination. They did eventually find enough space to get out of that, so I shouldn't be too critical of how they set up.
Of course, Nick Hiranet and Trey Katzmack have been doing this ultimate thing a little while longer than most other people, so you have to trust that they might have some idea.
And Philadelphia seemed to be on the same page. It was just, it took a little while to develop.
And even last season, you think about all the deep looks they threw to Trey Katzenbach. It was something teams didn't expect, and they kept doing it until teams found out and got privy to it. As David Brandoff comes in for Philadelphia after the timeout. So now being one throw away, they send her into Pana. Pana looking end zone. Instead, he goes to Hiranet. Hiranet just able to grab the shoestring catch. Brandoff finding his way free. Brandoff, Dave Baer moving around. Instead, it's Matt Glazer who's going to try to have to get this one in. But Glazer out of bounds. And Brandoff's throw not on target.
Yeah, DePaula eventually got the catch there, but that was starting to look like a very positive give-go. They lost a little bit of momentum on the bobble, but DC is off to the races right now. The downfield players are moving pretty quickly.
Here's a cross-field throw all the way to Kevin Moldenhauer.
It's a nice find.
Moldenhauer centers in. Again, good movement. Moses picks it up. Now 6 of the 7 players for DC have touched the disc on this possession. And that's the last man there. All 7 now have had a feel of the disc on this play. I feel like the movement from DC.
And they're still attacking right now. They're spacing pretty well. There we go, getting across the field. And I think DePaula's going to get a shot for an assist here.
Here's DePaula. The Spinners defense get back in time. Looking for the fake is Healy. Healy instead over to Moldenhauer. Looking for cutters downfield. Just as the sun covers up for the first time today. And the wind dying down.
You see Moldenhauer giving the little head tip there to let his cutter know which way to go. It's good communication.
And Bellinger did want the continuation there on the foul. Instead, the referees, I think they're going to call it back.
I'm hoping that was a travel call, but it looks like it won't be. I'm not This is one of those things where, as you said, the continuation is key. Oh, no. We do have a foul against DC.
It is a travel
here.
instead. I think that's why Bellinger was frustrated as well. First, he thought he got the foul. Then he wanted continuation, but instead, it's going to go against Bellinger.
It's a good reset for Philadelphia, though, because they're going to get to catch their breaths and try to attempt to play very good defense here.
Moldenhauer is going to have to track this one down. Moldenhauer, and he is unable to get to it.
I tell you, that disc dropped down at the last second. I thought Moldenhauer was going to catch it until it dove at the very last moment there.
I agree, Dusty. I think he timed his jump just about perfectly with the right hand. He was going to bring it in, but instead the wind taking it to the ground. And Philadelphia now wanting to break. They've already taken off 4 or 5 throws between Glazer and Sickles. Now Sickles going to huck at the end of the first quarter, but the wind again decides that it has other ideas. As the first quarter of action, you can tell the heat and the wind playing effect. 3-2 in favor of the Current, who have the one break in this one after 10 minutes. We will be back for the second quarter in just a second here on MOU Live.
The team dynamic is just to have as much fun as possible.
It's an experience, man. You turn around and you look and there's this big giant animal running towards you.
When I first started commentating, it was kind of tough for me because it's like, well, I can be out there too. I can play with these guys. Well, why am I up here in the booth?
Jeff Grant he's a freaking monster. He can sort of just do it all, you know?
A few of my students were like, we saw you on the bus. I was like, I don't ride the bus. No, you're on the side of the bus.
Back on MOU Live, there's the Philadelphia Spinners who held fast. They didn't get the score at the end, which would have been indeed just a hold for them. But Dusty, you told me during the break that the DC Current not getting the break there could pay dividends later for the Spinners.
Yeah, that's a big loss for the Current. They took sort of a hopeful, optimistic shot into the end zone. As we saw, they just dove. Moldenhauer didn't quite get his hand where it needed to be. But they would have been up with 2 breaks in the first quarter. They would have been up 2 goals going into the second quarter. And that second goal, it's just the sort of thing where you can tag that on at the end of the quarter. Philadelphia didn't manage to manufacture a particularly good shot going back the other direction, but simply to prevent DC from scoring is going to set them up well for the rest of this game.
And DC so far this season being outscored in the last 10 minutes of games 36-20. So for DC, you really do want to compile the points in the first about the first 30 minutes of the game, because again, those last 10 minutes have been tough for DC this year.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that that's all related to the same thing. They lost Lloyd Blake in that last game that they had against the Rumble, so they had a negative run there. And in other situations, it's been different things. So it's like a whole set of scenarios that seem to conspire against them in the fourth quarter. And as you mentioned, the more you can build that lead up beforehand, the better.
And for the Spinners, again, we have to reiterate, a victory here will mean they do qualify for the postseason, and they have had the eyes on the trophy at the end of the season. We talked about the Boston Whitecaps. They were the champions last season, and so the Philadelphia Spinners, while they would love home field advantage for that playoff game, they don't want to go back up to Hormel Stadium because, of course, 2 weekends ago, the Spinners lost their first game of the season on the road at Hormel Stadium to the Boston Whitecaps. They had an early lead, and the Whitecaps won by 1 point in overtime, and the Whitecaps only led 1 time in that game, and that was in overtime.
Yeah, so the key there is that for Philadelphia, they came into the MLU as a team that existed previously in the AUDL. They were the champions of the AUDL. Sort of came into that first season believing that they were going to do the same thing in the MLU. Boston proved them wrong, and Philadelphia was not very good the first couple years. This last season, they did very well. This season is sort of the culmination of all that work that they've done. A lot of this team has been playing together that whole time, and they'd love nothing better than to get a home field playoff game and then get a home field championship game.
Well, right now we've got some highlights of the DC Current. You saw that shoestring catch from Norbum. And so the DC Current, again, they last season got over the hump that was the Philadelphia Spinners in certain degrees, but the Spinners getting the last lap, of course, being the ones making the postseason. So for the Current, they don't want to end their season in disappointment as well, basically gifting their rival Philadelphia Spinners a spot in the playoffs.
Yeah, these two teams have to play each other 4 times in most seasons. So as a result of that, they're overly familiar with each other. They play each other in club, they've played each other in high school, they've played each other in college, depending on where the individual players go. Familiarity breeds contempt, and it's a sort of thing where neither of these teams wants to give up an inch, let alone a whole game.
And does that make you overthink some of the little things as well, instead of going out and playing your game, thinking about how you stop because you know the players so well?
It all depends on the individual. Some players don't even think about their opponents. They just go out and do their thing, and other players are so cerebral that they're always breaking down their opponents.
And speaking of cerebral, Nick Kieran, who last season led the league in touches per offensive possession. Here's Brandoff. He was able to keep it up, but Glazer wasn't able to get to it. So there is a quick turnover there by the Spinners. And looking for the break downwind, here come the DC Current.
This is DC's opportunity to get that break that they would have had at the end of last quarter and make that 2-goal lead.
Minor, and then there's the break throw. Beautifully lofted, just on the doorstep of the end line.
I'm not sure why he didn't attempt to actually get into the end zone there, but he'll get the assist instead. Perhaps he's more preferential for the assists rather than the goals.
So it was field right back to Austin Bartenstein, and Bartenstein's having a pretty good game for himself, an assist and a goal, and you could see with the give and go there.
Yeah, we haven't seen him over the early part of the season, but he's definitely making his presence felt today. He's a very confident thrower when he has the disc. He's getting into the backfield and sort of in those short cutting areas and getting the disc into his hands and then providing his teammates with a thrower who can get them the disc in this win today.
And with the Current up 4-2 with those 2 very important breaks here in the first half, Eric Salmi mentioned it to you, Dusty, that the DC Current aren't going to be able to replace Lloyd Blake with one player, but they're going to have to get contributions from a lot of players that don't normally do things, including Bartenstein.
Well, and more importantly, the thing that the DC Current can do is stay on defense. The more that they can keep their defensive team out there and get contributions from them, the better they'll be in once they get back onto offense. So the less you can lean on your offense missing a player, the better off they'll be.
So here are the Philadelphia Spinners, and they're going to be on offense, and it appears that there was one of those 20-second timeouts called by the DC Current, so they will get the midfield pull. But it looks like the referees, they didn't call it until they were on the line.
Yeah. I think that was exactly what they were trying to do, is wait as long as they could to take that timeout. So then the Philadelphia team won't necessarily know that it's going to be a half-field pull until late. So they'll already have their players on the line. DC will get a little bit of a rest. They just scored that deep point. I think it's a good tactical play by DC.
And there's that gamesmanship again between the Spinners and the Current. And you look at the wind, it's not necessarily going left to right or right to left on the field, but it's basically going from far sideline to near sideline, if you will.
And the angle keeps changing on it. Earlier on, it was going a little bit left to right, and now it's going a little bit right to left. So it's been on a diagonal, and I think sometimes it'll be straight at us, and other times it will be sort of shifting around.
And so, Dusty, we talk about the curvature of the disc. If the Spinners were to try to take a deep shot, it would have to be, what, an outside-in throw that would loft into the end zone in such a manner?
Well, so you would take that big outside-in backhand, and you can sit that coming all the way back across the field, but you can also sit a very flat flick out and then have it dive back towards your player, so long as you put sufficient power on it. And then it won't dive early, it'll dive late.
It looks like ultimately the call from the officials was, just trying to see here, it was the head official at midfield basically overruled the official on the far sideline. So it looks like it will be a full field puck instead for the pull.
Yeah, we'll have to be looking for some clarification either at halftime or after the game to see exactly what happened there. But we've got the big lefty pull here, and that's sitting pretty well. This is one of those deeper pulls we're talking about. DC would be wise to get down and try to disrupt Philadelphia early.
Baird, Hiranet. Hiranet overhead to Meta. And now they're already at the 25-yard line. Now Pana, see how quickly the Spinners move it across midfield. That's the first time it was stalled up for more than 2 seconds. Back to Hiranet.
There's definitely a pick downfield there. Looked like Moldenhauer was colliding with someone. I couldn't tell exactly who, but everybody's arm sort of flew up in the air. There were people bouncing around everywhere. Correct call by the refs.
So the 4 passes that moved the Philadelphia Spinners up ahead is called right back. So Pana will have it. He's looking for Sickles in the middle of the field. They find Sickles. And there's that deep look we talked about with Meta. Instead, they're going to cut right back to Hiranet. Hiranet, pretty fake there. Gets into the middle of the field for Pana. And now way in front of his man. So Pana is going to loft it deep. And it just falling in the wind and not in the end zone. Is the man Mike Arcata. And Arcata puts it on a platter for Sickles. Sickles in the end zone. You can hear it here at Carey Stadium. A big score there. And Billy Sickles, while he was a Rookie of the Year last year, he does show emotion every now and again. That's about as much emotion as we've seen from Sickles all season long at the start of this one.
He did a good job to give chase there, and you can see that he wants this game to go Philadelphia's way. This is the outside-in backhand that we were talking about from Pana that got all the way down on the field. He released it with a little bit of inside out, but set it up knowing that it would come back across the field.
Arcata was there to clean that up downfield. And then eventually, again, Sickles in the end zone for the goal.
And you can tell that there's wind today. Pana really wanted to just unleash the flick on the first look, but he thought maybe 2 or 3 times about it and said, no, I'm going to put this big backhand out instead. And the angle of the disc was kept low enough that the defender didn't have a chance to get up. So it seems like they're reeling in those laser hucks that we saw early on from both sides. I think they're getting the hang of this wind.
So both teams starting to settle into the game. And that could mean a higher scoring last 2.5 quarters.
I would be surprised if they only got 5 points in each quarter between the two of them.
Norbum in traffic. It looks like colliding with Esser. And it looks like Norbum didn't see him there.
That is such a dangerous play from all angles. Norbum has no idea where the defenders are coming from. The defenders aren't necessarily sure that he's aware of them. They're just going toward the disc. As we get a look at this, I think we have to ban Esser on that one. That's a play where Norbum already has the disc in his hand by the time that bid is being made. And he's gotten knocked so hard down to the ground right here, and he's been the key guy who has stepped in large part for Lloyd Blake.
And Esser, of course, is a whole lot of man to run into there.
And his elbow is up high. He's got Norbum up in the neck area. This has to be a banned. Admittedly, the refs don't have the opportunity to see the replay like we do, but I hope they get this call correct.
So Norbum looks to be all right, walking off over his own power. And you can see that with any head injury in sports, of course, the trainer's coming out looking at the player, and you can see that it looks like he might have just taken a shot in the nose, around the eye, around the cheek, instead of necessarily making contact with the head. And I think that was the initial fear from the trainers and the referees. But instead, again, it looks like Norblom will probably be able to shake it off, though he'll have to come off for this point at least. And so the referees, I think they're also now contemplating whether or not it was a ban that should be awarded to Esser.
The concern there also for Norblom is, did his head bounce back against the ground as he was going down? That's just so much collision there. And with the injury that DC has already suffered with Freund going down with a hamstring issue, if they lose Norblom as well, it'll cause all sorts of shifting around in terms of what their game plan is and who is expected to play in what roles today.
Coming in for Norblom is Delwico Johnson. Again, we continue to talk about Delwico Johnson, not as a player who's done much this game, but as a player who's trying to find his feet in this game. He, again, was our player to watch, and he has scored in every game so far this year for the Current. Here's Salmi with a stack on the far sideline of the field.
They didn't even get 10 yards on that. Norblom made the catch and then was cleaned out. They should have gotten 10 yards. They should have gotten more than that. Esser should have a ban. I'm very disappointed in this.
So that's
you have to protect the players.
An immediate turnover for there and no discipline for the Spinners. And they get it right back and could tie this game up with what would be a break.
They were fortunate to get an opportunity for a goal here, and this is Martin.
So Lindsay, and we're going to see Greg Martin, and that's why Greg Martin was our player to watch for the Spinners, pulling it in with the left hand. Martin ties it up at 4 apiece, 7:34 to play in the second quarter.
It should be his 11th break goal on the season, and once you see Martin going down one-on-one against the defender in the end zone, Salmi has no chance to get up as high as Martin does. There's no knock on Salmi. It's just that Martin has shown us over and over again that he does not get skied.
And Greg Martin, instead of, again, a novice player might go up with the right hand because that's closest to the disc, but he read the trajectory of the disc knowing that it would come easily down into his left hand.
Well, and also going up with your left hand in that scenario gives you a chance to keep the defender on your hip, and it gives you a chance to jump closer and then reach out farther to make that catch a little bit easier.
So a lot of issues there for DC, as not only did they on that point lose Norblom, but instead they immediately turn it over, and Philadelphia immediately gets a break.
This is a tough spot for DC. You knew adversity would come at some point, and it has arrived for the Current.
Salmi picks up, completing it right back to Salmi. Picking up about 15 yards to Flores. Flores immediately with the break. Upfield, they're looking for the huck, so Delwico Johnson. And now they eventually throw it up. It would have had to be a spectacular play, as the man defending was Nate Vendetta, and he had inside positioning on the offensive player in Khalifa.
I think Khalifa did the best job he could have to make that play. It needed to be a little bit deeper and a little bit softer. He would have created space for it. I like the deep look there. I'm confident that that's a good shot for them.
And giving it right back is Vendetta.
So throw very behind the receiver.
You saw he gave everything he could to bring it back in, and so the Current do get the hold through Khalifa. So the Current looked like they might have given it right back, but instead they were able to pull off the score. They retake the lead 5-4, 6:46 to play in the second quarter.
It's just a matter of who's going to make what sort of plays for DC today. This is what we mean when we talk about the team rallying together and getting a little more physical in practices, as Salmi mentioned. That was almost a spectacular catch by Khalifa.
Khalifa wasn't too far off, as you see, and there's Peck, the throw behind the receiver. But then the break there, Khalifa receiving the disc from Andrew Ferraro.
Ferraro is the sort of player that you could put in the place of Norblom for the rest of this game. He's another left-handed player, likes to use lefty backhand breaks, which is something we talk about a lot. Each team needs a sufficient number of lefties so that no matter which way the other team's forcing, you will have some players throwing backhands and some players throwing flicks.
The wind dying down for this point, as we are in our 10th point of the day. And again, that pole just floating down on the doorstep of the opposing end line. Panna picks up immediately for Brandoff. Brandoff to Katzenbach, cutting in. Sickles deked out of his own shoes.
Miner was giving some pretty good chase there. He's usually covering handlers, so it's interesting to see him on a more downfield player like Sickles.
Panna to Glazer. Glazer's been quiet after 6 goals. And Brandoff there with the sky.
I think
Going
Glazer's
up much later.
Glazer's got a tough matchup with Antoine Davis on him. Davis is always looking for an opportunity to display his athleticism.
Katzen back, looking for the final throw into the end zone. Instead, it's Glazer, able to wrangle it in. Sickles to his right, and looking for the end line, and into the end zone. A nice cut there by Mike Arcata. It looks like Arcata made a double move, and that's what got him free. It looked like he faked the in cut and then went deep into the end line, knowing how far he had in the end zone.
And both for Arcata and Glazer, as we were talking about, if you can use the aggression of your defender against them by giving a double move, maybe even a triple move, you can create so much more space for the throwers to make easy goal throws like that one.
So with 6:04 remaining, we are tied up at 5, and we will be back in just a second here on MOU Live. Again, tied up at 5 apiece. The Spinners looking to make the postseason, and the DC Current need a win here to make the playoffs.
That was an incredible game to watch.
It was a huge loss.
I just decided to launch and try to get it.
I knew if I went up early enough, I could get it.
And all of a sudden, there are feet kind of above heads.
Does it all come back to this loss? Does it all come back to this play?
If I had 4 hands, I would put all 4 hands on the ball.
It was up the other line. They had to deliver.
Boston kept doing this thing that you didn't think was possible.
Here on MOU Live, thanks for joining us. We've got our first half field poll of the day at 5 apiece between the Philadelphia Spinners and the DC Current at 6:04 remaining in the second quarter.
Well-placed midfield pull. Be right on the sideline.
It was inbound, so now they're going to need a throw to get it off the sideline. Greg Martin, the man defending. We've got a high stall count already, so throwing it up there into traffic and then picking it off.
That play was the result of the mark by Martin. He didn't allow the easier round, and DC put it up cross field, which is a dangerous, dangerous place.
So Gabe Colton then not only got the D, but then started it to Peck to Bryant, and in the end line for Greg Martin.
That entire goal, yeah, we had a nice pull from Esser. They started on the sideline, but all of that was a result of Martin. He put on the mark, and then Bryant was able to find him with a little bit of a laser backhand, but Martin was so ready for this goal that he just stuck his hand out and caught it. It was actually to the wrong side of him, so it's even better on his part. That point is totally Greg Martin. That's why he's one of the candidates for Rookie of the Year, probably the leading candidate.
He just keeps showing his athleticism game after game after game. But also to put yourself in position to make athletic plays takes a little bit of savvy as well.
Yeah, and the thing is, as you have that savvy and you show that athleticism, your teammates trust you more and more and more as the season goes on. If that hadn't been him, if that had been another receiver, Bryant may not have chosen to put that up.
That is the first lead of the game for the Spinners, 6-5 now, 5:40. So after starting with 2 breaks, the second break coming at the start of this quarter, it looks like the Spinners have taken over here at Carey Stadium. And, of course, they're 2-0 so far in the season here in Fort Washington. So they have used home field advantage to great effect. Salmi, that again in traffic, and it looks like Martin
That's
with the D. And they do call a foul.
Yeah, he had that caught already before Martin made the contact with it. It's a close call, but it's the correct call. Things are not looking good for DC's offense right now. They're looking stagnant. They're getting really harried by all the Philadelphia players.
And now Flores. Esser is right behind throwing the man, but it sets the man in front. Patrick Lindsay with the D.
Lindsay's a player that if you float a disc up near him, he's got the height, he's got the aggression, he's got very long limbs to go up and get it. Khalifa is in a good position, but he's sandwiched by Lindsay and Esser.
Now deep downfield, Bryant able to stay inbounds and shielding off Salmi. Bryant looking for the end zone, and easy floating it in. What a beautiful throw to Tom O'Connor by Izzy Bryant.
That's the same throw that we saw early on in the game from the DC Current to make a goal happen early on for the break, I believe. It's the same sort of thing. You sit up an outside-in flick, and you let the receiver chase it all the way down. This very first throw, I was surprised that they put it up to Bryant. Accurate. And then he takes his moment, sees that it's a one-on-one shot in the end zone, delivers the disc to the far side of the field. Either the mark has to stop that, or the defender has to be ready to chase on the far side. The defense wasn't working together.
So it looks like the DC Current will take a timeout. They want to talk things over down 7-5, 4:46 remaining here on MOU Live.
The the team dynamic is just to have as much fun as possible.
It's an experience, man. You turn around and you look and there's this big giant animal running towards you.
When I first started commentating, it was kind of tough for me because it's like, well, I can be out there too. I can play with these guys. Why am I up here in the booth?
Jeff Grant he's a freaking monster. He can sort of just do it all, you know?
A few of my students were like, we saw you on the bus. I was like, I don't ride the bus. No, you're on the side of the bus.
Dan Hilton and Dusty Rhodes on MLU Live. 4:46 remaining, so just about 6 minutes have gone off the clock, and the Philadelphia Spinners have turned this game around. They were down by 2 points, and now they're up by 2, 7-5. So for the Current, they out Lloyd Blake, and then they lose Joe Freund, and now they lose Zach Norbum, and now they're looking for answers.
It's going to be a really tough uphill road here for the Current. They gave up 3 breaks so far in this quarter. They gave up a 2-point run earlier. They're in the middle of giving up a 3-point run, could turn into a 4-point run. And I'm not sure what their answers are. It looked like Norbum was going to be very featured in their offense. They have to find a way to replace him after he was sort of replacing Lloyd Blake. If they can rally behind the concept that Salmi gave us early before the game started and figure out how to put all the weight on their whole team rather than an individual here or there, they'll be set up well for it. But Philadelphia seems to have their number. It looks like they know exactly what's happening with the DC Current's offense, and they're prepared for it. Some of the players on the Spinners are sort of making the cut that the Current should be making before the Current are having the opportunity to. They're already out in front of them, and I don't know what the next plan is for the Current. I don't know what their adjustment's going to be. In this situation, it looks like they're going to be moving Gibson over to the O-line as well and changing up some of the rest of their team. They have to find a solution, and if they wait to the second half or the fourth quarter, that'll be too late.
And it's no surprise statistically, Dusty, as Philadelphia's D-line leads the league in defensive scoring efficiency at 44.5%. So pretty much almost 50% of the time, their defense is able to go out there and get a break and get a score. And so Philadelphia also offensively, though, they have the highest offensive scoring efficiency in the East at 67% and have totaled 130 goals through 6 games. That's a plus 39-point differential as well. And so, yes, while there have been a few blowouts that have padded those stats, right, still, it does tell you that Philadelphia has been very successful against the DC Current and at least the New York Rumble.
Yeah. Yes, that's a perfect illustration of how difficult this is going to be for DC. And right now, they're generating opportunities for the Spinners to get blocks rather than open cuts.
It's Khalifa. Now Gibson gets his first touch of the game. Salmi in the middle of the field.
Every single one of these cuts from DC, there's a player on his back from the Spinners who's closing harder to the disc than the DC Current are running.
Salmi to Gibson. Gibson still, again, they have not get a forward pass, and Peck just picking it off easily. Cutting off the angle, and now another break.
I was fortunate.
Esser lost it, and it looks like we might have a foul here. Gibson getting fouled by O'Connor, so we will get the 10 yards. And they were looking for Dunn in the end zone. And normally, Dusty, what you see is that in this situation, he's going to go right back to Dunn because Dunn is still the man isolated, but no, instead they're going to reset and get a vert stat going.
Yeah, so we'll have an opportunity here to see who the Spinners choose to isolate on their end zone offense. O'Connor will be looking to throw a goal early on.
In a vertical stack instead, they go to the break side to Isaiah Bryant. Bryant looking for Esser initially, and then the break back to O'Connor. O'Connor into the end zone for, eventually it's Patel, it looks like. Instead, nope, that is Bryce Dunn. So the original man that O'Connor looked for to the end line after 7 passes does eventually get the score.
And the ability of each one of the Spinners involved in that play to confidently and calmly break the mark was what led to the eventual goal. One of the things we see here is that Peck is reading the backfield of the Current. So he's not facing his man so much as he is facing back towards the disc and reading the field. It looks like that seems to be the plan for most of Philadelphia's man defense, is to make sure they see the disc rather than worry about getting in between their man and the disc. If that's the case, DC could be in for they have to figure out how to solve that.
And we've heard Philadelphia talk about, they know that's one of their strengths, is they have such good handler defense that allows their defensive cutters downfield to take advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah, I feel like what DC needs to do is sort of use, as we mentioned earlier, is use the aggression of the Philadelphia handler defenders against them. Get them out of position, give a couple more jukes, real cuts. but they have to use the aggression against Philadelphia.
Picking it up and now moving ahead to Davis. They pick up 20 yards there, and now going ahead upfield. It's going to be another deep look, and there for the D, they say no foul as Wickens got the D.
That was a truly late throw from Davis. He saw that cut going and waited 2 seconds, 1 second, somewhere around that longer, rather than putting it up on the very first look. That allowed the Philadelphia defense to give chase and make the block.
That pass intended for Andrew Gravender. Now working hard on the other side of things and getting himself open is Vendetta.
And he was open deep earlier on. Just took that cut underneath. He had the defender whichever way he wanted him.
Vendetta, Shields, Wickens. Now these guys, not necessarily the first team for the Spinners or the second team.
And this is the sort of thing that happens when we're in the middle of a 4-point run, could be turned into a 5-point run. You rely on the bottom of your roster, and I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just the lower rotations.
Wickens, and pulling it in there is Arcata. Arcata, this is more a difficult throw, and it is going to result in a turnover. Youngblood went for the layout, but it was Bloodgood, unable to wrangle it in.
So DC Current is taking a breather here before they get started. Going right away to Antoine Davis, who was open by a decent amount.
And Davis to Jackson. Jackson on the near sideline. Lindsay is the man defending, cutting off that back pass, so he goes forward.
You even got a hand on that swing pass there from Webster.
The break to Bartenstein. Now Davis thought he was going to go for the initial look to Jackson, and then it was Lindsay. He's frustrated there. You could see he's exasperated because he lost his footing, and he knows that's the only reason that Jackson was able to get free for the goal, making it 8-6 in favor still of the Spinners, 1:45 remaining in the second quarter.
Yeah, and it's the sort of thing where Lindsay knew that they were isolating his man on that short side of the field, lost his footing a little bit. He even knew that he was trying to come back across there.
So the Current finally find an answer, and while they were reeling, they're still only down by 2, and we'll be right back here to see if the Current continue to have an answer for the Spinners. The DC Current looked out of sync, but they finally, after a 4-goal streak by the Spinners, able to find an answer. Still down by 2, 1:45 remaining in the second quarter. And Dusty, how did the Current finally figure out a way to the end line?
Well, it wasn't pretty, but they eventually got there. They stuck with it throughout that point. Now they're going to take advantage of this midfield pull and try to pin Philadelphia all the way back. They will. They'll start literally on the back line here, but they'll start with a double team.
So Dave Baer, smart by him to immediately get into position and throw it up to Brandoff.
That little floaty pass is kind of what DC should be looking for to attempt Callahan there. But there was enough space just behind this the front wall of the zone that it was an easy completion.
Hiernet is still in his end zone, though, and then Baer is the open man. They get all the way upfield to Glazer. Good work by Philadelphia to get out of a bind there in their own end zone.
It's good, confident movement. They don't seem to be very flustered either by the wind or the DC Current's defense right now.
And it looks like this is the first offensive team. Players have played together for quite some time. Panna looking for Meta downfield. Instead, they go short to Katzenbach. Katzenbach on the near sideline. Up ahead to Meta, another 10 yards. Really moving the disc well are the Spinners. Now back to Katzenbach. And you can see going all out for it there.
Yeah, I thought DePaulo was going to get the D there. It was a good read by him, good anticipation. That may have been their one chance on this point.
So Brandoff over to Glazer. Glazer could have gone to Hiernet. Instead, he cuts back. Gibson back on Hiernet. Into the middle of the field, Glazer, and easily into the end zone for Meta. Now, Dusty, you're saying there might have been a travel there by the Spinners, but the referees didn't see it, so it is 9-6, 36 seconds remaining in the second.
He just took an extra step. It's the sort of thing where it frustrates me repeatedly to see it, but it's not an egregious travel. There wasn't anyone on him. It's just the sort of thing, I just don't like it. We did see Meta's celebration there. I gave him a little bit of criticism earlier because he was dropping the wrong hand when he was shooting his bow. He's gotten it to the point where he's releasing the arrow rather than releasing the bow. So big ups on that.
It does, we have to mention, it's just like in basketball when, of course, if there's a highlight reel dunk coming, the referees very often stop play on a travel. And again, you got to let the highlights roll. And that's what happened there, where we had just again one throw away from an open man in the end zone. And so again, the referees so often, not that they didn't see it, but those are situations where you might take a blind eye.
And to be fair, it was not an egregious travel. And
Right.
on second look, I thought he caught the disc maybe a step earlier than he actually did. But clean open throw to an open receiver there.
So
I'm all right with how it resolved.
Even if you were to stop the play back, well, again, it would be 10 yards. So as this one floated up and Flores able to bring it in, Esser was all over him on his back. So there's Salmi right back in the middle. No downfield cutters, and Martin again going for the D.
And he set himself up far enough away from that reset that he had an opportunity to accelerate back toward the disc as the pass was being thrown. DC's got to be careful of that all game long.
Ferraro in the middle of the field. And now
7
cutting
seconds
individuals.
left.
And now we've got 5 seconds, so Khalifa is going to have to throw up a hammer to the end zone, and Dunn evilly knock it down as the first half, comes to an end. The second quarter, it's 9-6 in favor of the Spinners, as the Current allowed the Spinners to score 4 straight points, and we'll break it down in the halftime report and potentially get an interview as well coming up in just a second. Back here on MOU Live, Dan Hilton and Dusty Rhodes at halftime. The Philadelphia Spinners leading the DC Current 9-6 to score at this time. And we've had some highlight reel plays so far, particularly by the Philadelphia Spinners. They're in that second quarter of action, led by the number 2, a first-year player for the Philadelphia Spinners, in Greg Martin. And we're being joined by Greg right now. And Greg, it's been hot, it's been windy down there, but you guys seem to have an answer for the Current. And could you just walk me through that huck on the far side where, again, your teammates, being your first year, they continue to have faith in you, they continue to throw those hucks to you. But, again, walk me through that huck where you picked it up with your left hand.
Oh, yeah. We know after turnovers, we know to spread the field out, so I'm just going deep after that right away. And I know at practice we've been doing a lot of huck drills, and I have great teammates like Matt Esser going up with me, so it's always a competition, and I'm always getting ready for those big throws.
Speaking of your teammates, you guys went on a 4-0 run there over a 5-minute span, and it wasn't just the top of your roster that was doing it. Tell us a little bit about who's on the bottom of your roster. How are those guys doing so well against DC today?
Well, our whole entire roster is always going 100% during practice, and I think that allows us to have a lot of depth. And no matter what happens, we've got David Shields out there who's got a great flick. You saw him earlier after a turnover. He puts it right up to Esser, clears out about 30 yards, and that opens up the field for us to get more plays in. So after these, we go deep, and it works out for us.
And Greg, defensively, is the game plan to trust your handler defense? Again, continue to grab down on those DC Current handlers, and again, allow your defense to dictate the offense.
Yeah, sorry, it's kind of loud down here.
What's loud up here, too?
Our D handlers, yeah. People like Izzy, so confident with the disc. No matter what he has it, no matter what the stall count is, he's always looking for the best throw, and he's been executing a lot today. It's great.
It looks a little bit like your downfield defense is sort of looking back toward the disc a lot rather than playing with their backs to the disc. Is that something you focused on in this matchup specifically?
I think it has to do with the wind a little bit, where our cutters are still a little too deep. We're getting used to the wind, and that makes us kind of rely on our handles a little bit more, like you said. I think we're too far downfield, and we have to work on getting it closer in. That way we can have more throws. This wind's been picking up, and it's more of a challenge for us, but the second half we're going to come out here and try to fix it.
Well, Greg, as windy and as hot as it has been, you guys still able to manage to get through the first half with a lead. Again, congratulations on the first half of play, and we'll let you get the opportunity to talk to your team as you're ready for the second half. Thanks, Greg.
All right, thank you.
Again, that was Greg Martin. And so Dusty and I will be back as you heard Greg's halftime analysis. You'll get it from Dusty Rhodes and I in just a sec here on MLU Live. We are at Carey Stadium in beautiful Fort Washington, Pennsylvania. We've had high winds today with plenty of sun as well in the high 80s, but it looks like the Philadelphia Spinners unaffected, leading the DC Current 9-6 after 4 straight points in that second quarter. And no surprise, the numbers say the Spinners had this in them. Of course, they can clinch a playoffs with a win, and statistically the best defensive team in MLU. 91 opposing goals coming into this game, so 97 if you're keeping track at home. And that's 15.2 opposing goals per game. That's also the fewest in MLU. But the Spinners on the other side also score plenty. But, Dusty, we talked about it. That first quarter of action, only 5 total points scored by both teams. And the second quarter, not much better. This one a low-scoring game.
Yeah, neither team scored over the last 4.5 minutes of the very first quarter. That sort of gives us a sense of it's being challenged by the wind, and both teams are giving credible effort on defense. The run there that Philadelphia went on over 5 minutes, where they went on a 4-0 run, that's the sort of thing where we're seeing the Philadelphia Spinners challenge on defense. We talked about looking back into the backfield, trying to see what the handlers are doing. What that also does is it means the Philadelphia Spinners' hips are facing back towards the disc. One of the things that the Current could do in this second half is to pressure underneath with a couple steps and then take the opportunity to cut deep. The problem is when we've seen the DC Current throw deep today, they've been hesitant. They haven't put it up right away. They've taken an extra second or so, and that gives the Spinners an opportunity to catch up to the disc. The Current, in order to get back into this game, are going to have to be decisive and aggressive.
So again, talking about that Spinners defense, we saw offensively and defensively the Spinners showing off their depth in this game. And we know they do have that depth, 10 players with 10-plus points, only 2 players with over 100 catches coming into this game for the Spinners. But on the other side for the Current, they were without Lloyd Blake from the start, and then they lost Norbum, and then they lost Joe Frayne, and then they lost Norbum. So again, with just those dominoes offensively falling for the Current, they again are just looking for answers here. And is it not necessarily a game plan where they can't find an answer, but necessarily just players in different situations are not used to.
Yeah, and we started to see them sort of ad hoc move some players around at different spots, try out some different lineups. Ideally, this halftime will give them an opportunity to say, okay, here's our plan going into the second half. Here are the players that we're going to use on offense. This is going to be our strategy. The key is to regroup and attack differently than they had been doing in the first half.
The Current, again, one of the players that we wanted to see for the Currents today, Delrico Johnson, with 16 goals, 8 assists, 8 blocks, and 78.3% passing coming into this game. Hasn't really done much today. Is it necessarily that he has had to play too many points offensively and defensively? Because we see that he keeps being the guy substituted in on those injuries. But again, it's necessarily being a cutter downfield. If the handlers can't get you disc, you can't do much anyway.
I think a lot of it had to do with the way that Philadelphia started off the game. We talked about the zone that they come down in off of pull plays, where they sit one defender really deep, and the other 6 players play underneath, play against the handlers. That'll take your handlers out of looking for the deep shots early. And then when you adjust later on and play more man defense, the handlers have already been shown that there's an extra defender deep. So Delrico Johnson has had difficulty finding space and separation, and there have been help defense over the top. He's also in a situation right now where a couple of the key throwers, we're talking about Norbum and Blake again, are not on the field. So he's not used to cutting for the rest of these guys. Doesn't know their throws quite as well as he knows the other two.
Well, Delrico Johnson could be an important player for the DC Current in the second half. On the other side, our player to watch for the Spinners certainly showed up in that first half. We got to talk to him again right at the start of the halftime with Greg Martin, who we saw he had 2 pretty nice goals today. One was on a huck, and then one was just, again, short 10-yard pass. But one, he, again, had to show his athleticism, bringing in with one hand. And so a Rookie of the Year candidate, again, he does have 2 other in Matthew Esser and Billy Sickles, who might have a few ideas on how to win that award.
The key for him has been that on the defensive side, as he talked about it, once the Spinners get a block, they look to isolate a player deep. And the 2 players that we talk about most often with that are Greg Martin and Matt Esser. They floated a couple discs up to Esser. He came down with them. Greg Martin, they floated a couple discs up to him. He came down with them. The issue for me right now is still Esser should have a band right now. He should have been warned about that play at very least. I hate to bring it back to that so much, but It was just the sort of play that makes all of us get tense in the booth, makes me a little nervous about what's going on the field. We need to tamp that down a little bit, but Philadelphia is in control of this game.
Of course, this is a heated rivalry. They've met 13 times now. Today is number 14. The Current lead that series 8-5 over the last few years. Well, we'll continue our halftime analysis coming up on the other side of the break, including a special league announcement about the championship game this season. Again, this coming up in the halftime report on MLU Live. Back at Carey Stadium, Dan Hilton and Dusty Rhodes. It's 9-6. at halftime between the Philadelphia Spinners and the DC Current. Again, we wouldn't be where we are without our league sponsors. We want to give a special thank you to Canterbury, the official apparel supplier to Major League Ultimate. Dress like a pro, visit www.canterburyus.com, the destination for all your team's custom uniforms and athletic apparel needs. Canterbury, proud partner of Major League Ultimate, committed to the game. And U.S. Coachways. Do you have a team trip or corporate outing coming up? If so, charter a private bus, minibus, or party bus from busrental.com, a U.S. Coachways company. Bus travel is one of the safest, greenest, and most affordable ways to get your group to an event. If you're going with a group, trust busrental.com. Enter coupon code MOUBUS and get additional savings and VIP treatment. And finally, Skippy, the official peanut butter of the Philadelphia Spinners. Made with the funnest peanuts ever. Skippy, yippee.
I got to tell you, I think the DC Current came up in one of the party buses this time around. It's a big, sort of long van-looking thing. It looks very comfortable in there. I think we rode up in one a couple years ago. I like the looks of those.
I think every team enjoys, maybe not necessarily coming to Philadelphia, but at least not going to Boston is always the idea that every team enjoys not going to Boston. Well, speaking of going somewhere, the MLU championship game this season will be at Villanova University for the first time on Saturday, July 16th. This is the first year the game will be held there after the University of Pennsylvania's Franklin Field in 2013 and PPL Park in 2014 and 2015. But back here to Carey Stadium, we have had plenty of highlights and pretty good things happening today for at least the Philadelphia Spinners, but the DC Current have had a few highlights of their own as well. We started the game off here with David Brandoff to Billy Sickles, and he pulled it again. He is a lefty and pulls it in with the easy left hand. And then Roman, and that's one of the Ds there by Antoine Davis, and one of the highlights for the Current.
Nice kick pluck there from Khalifa as well. And here we see Martin just doing what Martin does, going up and getting the disc at his high point so that no one else has an opportunity, just sticking his paw out there, making the easy catch. I really like this throw from Bryant. A good cross-field throw. Sits for so long. You see the defender Flores was overplaying the strong side. The easy run out for O'Connor.
And then there's Davis, who hucked it deep, but Wickens was there for the D. And when you talked about the disc again with the wind, just hucking it, whether the wind is pushing it down or pushing it up. And we even have to go back to that one play with Kevin Moldenauer when we just saw that Moldenauer, he lined it up. He was prepared to lay out and grab the disc at the right time, but at the last second, the wind had a different idea.
I thought he gave perfect chase to that disc. I was sure it was going to be a catch. I've seen him make catches like that for so long,
of course,
that I was so confident in it, and the disc just dropped down a little bit. That said, you can see the players out here who are more confident with their throws and have enough edge control that they're putting the disc out, they're controlling how it moves in the wind for the most part, but you can never stop those discs hopping up and down in the wind.
Well, former head coach of the Current, Kevin Moldenauer, is again now just a player, and current head coach Will Smolinski in his first season talking to his team now, preparing them for the second half of action, which we will have in just a second here on MLU Live. Back in Fort Washington, Pennsylvania, Dan Hilton and Dusty Rose. And Dusty, it's 87 degrees. Do you think it feels like it down there as much as it would up here? But you can tell the players pretty unfazed, though, by the heat.
They're unfazed, but that's because they're prepared for this. This is why you run all those track workouts. This is why you work out in the gym. This is why you're ready for it. However, I bet it's hotter than 87 degrees down on the turf. It has a tendency to soak in heat, radiate it out through the whole game. So they're feeling heat just from coming down from the sun, and they're also feeling heat coming up through the bottom. It is cooler up here. I left from D.C. this morning. It was planning to get up over 90 down there, and that's probably more what it feels like down on the turf today.
So we could see some second half fatigue potentially. As, again, we also talked about it at the beginning of the game. Both of these teams were out here for quite some time out on the field. The Spinners close to 2 hours, 2.5 hours before game time.
Well, it's a certain level of you want to be out here long enough that you're acclimated to the heat, because if you sit in, say, air conditioning, if you sit in your car for a while, then as soon as you step out of the car, you're hit by this wave of heat. You want to be prepared for it. You want to feel comfortable in it, but you can sit out in the sun for far too long if you ask me. I would be trying to wear a long sleeve underneath my jersey today because I would try to be keeping the sun off of me. I don't know how they do it with just that sun pounding down the whole time. That was one of the keys for me. I always wanted long sleeve jerseys.
Spinners again unfazed by the heat and the wind in the first half. They lead 9-6 as we start the second half of action. And it will be the Philadelphia Spinners who will be starting the second half with the disc.
Yeah, as we take a look at who DC had out there on the offensive line, that looks like almost an entirely defensively focused line. So we were having a little bit of difficulty telling who was going to be coming out on offense. This is going to be a battle of two defensive teams. That could be one of two things. It could be an easy score, or it could be one of those long, long points where neither team manages to get into the end zone.
So a correction here, actually, it will be the Spinners who will giving off to the offense of the Current. And just to give you an update there, it looks like Furloin is still not out there. So he has remained sidelined.
Yeah, I don't think we'll see him or Freund coming out in the rest of the game. Freund, the hamstring was iced up immediately as he came off. And then when we saw Norbrom walking off, you could see that he was sort of mentally dealing with what had happened to him. You get a little bit of shy eyes, so to speak. The light coming in, if you've hit your head, can be very stressful. And he was checked out on the sideline. Doesn't look like he'll be returning.
Well, one of the players returning for the second half, of course, Delwico Johnson, one of our players to watch for the DC Current. As you mentioned, that defensive line with Isaiah Bryant and Greg Martin sang his praises as well as David Brandoff at halftime.
It almost looks like DC is just trying to find as many athletes as they can to put them out on the field because they know that turnovers are going to happen and they need to get the disc back, as we talked about before the game.
So restarting here, again, a whole different crew than we normally see. As Peck going there in, and that leaves Moldenauer as the open man downfield. Moldenauer for Delwico Johnson. Esser's on his back, but Johnson goes up early and brings it in. A good start there by the DC Current, 16 seconds in. Bring it back to a 2-point game, now 9-7.
And that's one of the things to keep in mind there is that it is only a 2-point game. That means the whole game is in the balance still. Philadelphia can just can hold out for the rest of the game, but it's not so close that DC is out of it. The thing that I would worry about if I was DC is that's the second opportunity that Ethan Peck has had to get a poach block, a block from off of his man. And if he keeps getting opportunities like that, he's going to get one of them, going to get two of them, maybe even three.
He did get one at the end of the first half as well, but it didn't even look like a poach because he really just had the disc thrown right to it.
And that's what we're talking about when these Philadelphia Spinners defenders can read the field and make a better offensive cut than the Current are making.
So now the Current will be on defense, and we see the normal offensive suspects out there, Matt Glazer, Nick Hiranet. And Matt Glazer has been one of the linchpins for the offense this year with 18 goals. Albeit 1/3 of those goals did come in the first matchup when he scored 6 against the Current. And Billy Sickles with 11 goals and 13 assists coming in today, of course, and Sickles has had a few. 1 goal at least and 1 assist as well.
Pull floated out of bounds there a little bit, and the wind has shifted again, so it's coming more left to right than it is crossfield right now. It's still a diagonal wind as opposed to straight up and down, but it caught hold of the underneath part of that disc and floated all the way out.
So Brandoff will start with the disc in the middle of the field with Moldenauer defending. Dave Baer is the man out into space. And a good read by two very experienced players. So Baer looking for that huck down to Sickles instead into the middle of the field. For Arcata, then Hiranet.
They're working a very spread out offense right now. Each one of these cutters has enough space to work individually, and the Philadelphia Spinners handlers are confident enough to throw it.
And that's a throwaway by Glazer, something very uncharacteristic. You saw the give and go between Glazer and Hiranet, and then Glazer, maybe even too easy to Baer in the end zone. And almost a Callahan there, and a beautiful play by the Philadelphia Spinners. David Brandoff getting the foot block, and then the Callahan.
That play was individual excellence at its finest. And you can see the disappointment from DePaula there as he got hand block up high here on the scuba attempt, and Brandoff lays out, takes it away from over the top of the outstretched hands of DePaula. That's Philadelphia exerting their will here. That was an opportunity for DC. They couldn't even complete one pass. They needed that break.
And David Brandoff, we'll get another look at it here. They bring the double team, and then knocking it up into the air, and then the layout by Brandoff. Getting his one hand in between the two hands of DePaula. You talked about individual excellence. Well, that pretty much sums it up.
that play, that's the sort of play that you dream about as an Ultimate player. Not only do you get a hand block on a scooper, which is up over your head, you then have the presence of mind to lay out for it, catch it for a Callahan, and in the MLU, now DC has to pull back to the spinners. The spinners will get another opportunity to start with the disc here and go up another point.
And a Callahan, again, does just pad on the negativity for a team that had cut it back to 2 for the Current. They had started the third quarter of action with a score. So here's Hiranet back on offense. Tapana in the middle of the field. Meta trying to get himself free. To Sickles on the sideline. Minor again still on Sickles. A difficult matchup for Minor.
Deep cuts are not really available right now for the spinners.
And now they get 2 to break deep, and Bayer's the one who comes back in. Hiranet, the strike cut in. Then Hiranet, that disc just floating up in the air, really not anybody's fault. And the wind had its own ideas.
This could be the second time this season that I've seen one team get a Callahan and then have an opportunity on offense.
So Davis into the end zone, and on the other side there, Bayer, and Jackson looked like trying to clean it up. Almost got to the disc.
He didn't really trust that it was going to come through untouched. It may have gotten a little tip there, but Jackson had an opportunity to catch that with both hands.
So Bayer will get it right back. As Nick Hiranet uncharacteristically, turned it over on the last possession for the Spinners. So we've got a call downfield. It looks like between Meta and Cobb.
So we've got an offensive foul on Meta is going back. Probably push Cobb off. Cobb has been playing very physically on Meta in addition to having the speed to catch up with him.
And so Meta immediately goes deep on him instead. This is going to be another throwaway for the Spinners. Roman unable to get to the throw from Sickles, but Sickles overthrew him, and so the Current give it right back.
Just bounced off Griezmann's hands there. It's an execution error. It was a pretty perfect throw. It didn't look like it hopped. DC's really got to get this. They've gotten 2 opportunities to break back upfield after the Callahan.
And now almost a 2-minute point, as now Sickles is using his body really, really well. And up over the top, another highlight reel grab for Billy Sickles. 11-7 the score now, 7:17 remaining in the third quarter.
The play there in between Sickles and Griezmann on this deep shot. This is what it is to battle for position. Neither one of them is overly pushing each other, but they're making contact, trying to control the space right around their bodies. Sickles has proven excellent at that. Overall, Griezmann tends to get up early right next to the player who's going up against him. Sickles only beat him by an inch or 2, but that's enough. Now DC is back on offense, and they're down 4 instead of a 2-point game that we just had a couple minutes ago.
And a Callahan really can change everything, especially, again, a Callahan that wound up being, again, obviously it's a break, because obviously you're on defense. That's how a Callahan happens, but that can really change the momentum, and that's been most important for the DC Current. They've needed the right momentum in games, but in the first half, losing so many important players, and now in the second half, the Callahan happening. So while it's only a 4-point game, and we've seen in the MLU this season, teams have come back for 4 or 5, especially it's only the start of the third quarter, but still the Spinners in the driver's seat.
The Spinners have given up a couple runs against opponents. It has been the Whitecaps primarily who have gone on runs against the Spinners this season. I haven't seen it from DC against Philadelphia, but both of these teams have the opportunity to play with the wind today. As a defender, you love playing in a windy game.
Ferraro. Then they finally get it to the far sideline. Now here's Salas. Justin Salas has been pretty quiet today. He got the start on the offensive line to begin this game. Now Ferraro looking for the break. They get it up over to Bartenstein. Now Moldenauer lofting it up to Flores, and Flores able to track it down.
The key there was the confidence with which Bartenstein turned upfield and immediately delivered a flick up on the break side. That set up the whole rest of it there. He's really impressed me today. I haven't seen as much from him in the previous part of the season, but he's come out, as we mentioned earlier, he's come out confident. He gets the disc in his hands and makes positive plays afterward.
And it seems like the plays he's making, Dusty, are very controlled. They're very simple throws, and sometimes that's the best throw. It doesn't get you in the highlight reel, but it does help get your team points.
But it's simple, and it's confident and powerful. So a lot of times people try to make simple plays. They take a little bit off the disc, float it up a little too much, let the wind do something about it. This is one of the things I like to talk about is you want to throw through your receiver, not to your receiver. So you want to throw with enough power that is going almost through the receiver's chest rather than trying to sit it too carefully out in front. Trust your receiver's hands.
So the DC Current, after all that, only down by 3, 11-8 now. They're looking for a few breaks to get themselves back in it. Under 7 to play in the third quarter. And back on offense is Dave Bear, who picks the disc up, along with David Brandoff. Those two were in the double team that got the Callahan for David Brandoff.
Philadelphia out of a pretty classic horizontal stack here.
There's Radums. The break. Now Meta for Glazer. Glazer finally finds himself free. That's probably only the third or fourth catch for Matt Glazer today, who had 6 goals against the Current earlier this season. In the middle of the field, Brandoff, and beautiful offense there by the Spinners into Meta for the score. Now it's 12-8, 6:26, and that's about as picture-perfect as you like it from the Philadelphia offense.
And the cut from Brandoff there was the key. That's what made all this happen. He took a little inside route, got the defender back behind him into Paula, and after that, the mark doesn't have an opportunity to catch up, and the timing for the cutter downfield was perfect. He was already open, going over to the break side, no mark, no downfield defense, easy goal.
Himalaya Meta on the score sheet for the first time this game. So now these teams trading points, and for the DC Current, that's something you can't do. Of course, they're going to need to get a few breaks. They're going to have to figure out this offense, but meanwhile, they're going to have to continue to answer offensively themselves, which was the problem in the first half.
It's tough. The wind is still not making it so that there are so many unforced errors, but it's making all of the rest of the plays tight. It's making some of the DC throwers a little hesitant to complete passes, which is the exact opposite of what we talked about with Bartenstein earlier.
Ferraro to Gibson. Gibson, isolation between Johnson and Esser downfield. They get it into Johnson. Martin again, just a fingertip away from the D. Instead, it's Davis who picks it up, and Davis now the man wide open, but Martin able to track back in time. Bartenstein lofting it beautifully back to Ferraro. And then this pass to no one in particular, but saved there by Moldenauer. Now Johnson upfield for Davis. Davis against Martin. What a fun matchup there. Instead, it's Gibson in the middle of the end zone. The DC Current, they look like they were a little disgruntled, if you will, on that offensive point at one moment. But when Kevin Moldenauer got the disc back after that, we'll say, errant pass, that's when they really settled down.
It's interesting. Sometimes a floaty pass that your team comes down with on offense can actually be a boon to the rest of your offense. So he pulled 2 defensive players in, went up in the right space at the right time to make the catch, and then the offense continued on.
After that, Callahan, we've had 4 straight holds, and we'll see if the Current can finally get some breaks when we come back. And instead, we'll see with the Current. We thought it was going to be a half-field pool, but for the second time this game, Dusty, we're getting a little tricked by those half-field pool calls. Instead, this one is just going to be a full-field pool, so no timeout here. Instead, it's 12-9. The Spinners lead the Current, 5:46 remaining in the third quarter.
As we talked, the wind has shifted again. It's almost from right to left on a diagonal, and DC really needs to get the pressure on early on these Spinners handlers.
Hironet catches the disc on the pole. Brandoff with Jackson on his back, so that brings Katzen back wide open. In the middle of the field to Glazer. For the Current, if you take a chance on defense, the Spinners, normally burn you. And that's what we could see here, as just dropping it in the end zone was Doug Roman.
He was open for a long time there. They gave good chase in the end, but Roman was so open that he got a minute to think about the catch before he made it and just misapplied his 2 hands.
Here's Griezmann, who's going to huck it deep. Looks like Glazer's on the back, but getting out in front of it was Gravender. Gravender telling Jackson to step back to the disc, but Jackson had already gone too far away from the man.
Cobb has been open on the far side of the field for a little bit. He's now picked up. DC's just got to stay confident in their offense.
Jackson pulls it in with the left hand. Now one throw away. Jackson looking for Cobb finally, but it was 2 out in front, and Arcata gets the D.
I don't think Arcata was the original player covering Cobb. I think Brandoff was. Philadelphia pulled a switch in the end zone at just the right moment by reading the offense.
And then Brandoff immediately throws it away. So Jackson picks it up. This time they get it to Cobb. See if Cobb looks towards the end zone. Cobb directing traffic. And it looks like we might have a timeout here. And indeed, that's what the referees are calling it. So we will step aside now and be back in just a second with the Spinners leading 12-9, 4.5 to play in the third quarter. Fort Washington, Pennsylvania is the site for this Eastern Conference matchup in MLU action. 12-9, the Spinners lead the DC Current. 4:30 remaining. We have to reset. Just to remind everybody, the Philadelphia Spinners with a win make the postseason. The Current lose and you're out. And it would be the Whitecaps and the Spinners. We would know a few weeks in advance that they would be the teams to battle it out for a spot in the MLU championship game.
And they would just be fighting for home field advantage at that point. And we mentioned this over and over again. Nobody likes traveling up to Boston to play. Teams have a very bad record up there. The Spinners beat them once. The Current beat them once. And aside from that, Boston doesn't lose games at home. So Philadelphia has to fight this whole way. Coming out back onto the field here when we get the opportunity, Will Smolinski did a very intelligent thing there by calling the timeout and getting the disc, keeping the disc in his team's possession. The dump set for the DC Current was a little clogged. Griezmann was back behind the disc, and instead of clearing upfield to allow Cobb in a round throwing lane, he kind of stuck back there. Then the top of the stack was a little clogged as well. Cobb was just going to put the disc up into the end zone, and instead the Current will have an opportunity here to put whatever line they want out there to get this hold and to pull the game back within 2. This game, it feels like Philadelphia has been in control the whole way, but the maximum lead that they've had has been a 4-goal lead, and if they can keep it tight and DC can overcome their fourth quarter woes, Philadelphia could be in a fight they didn't expect by the end of this game.
So the DC Current do just that, Dusty. They do basically put an entire new line out there. Ferraro, instead of Cobb, who had the disc when we went to the stoppage, Ferraro's the one who picks it up. They bring the double team, so it looks like he might have to throw something up in the wind. Instead, it's a dump back. Then Gibson cuts in for the disc. The Current, after 3 passes, still in the exact same spot when the timeout was called. Ferraro with the layout catch. Thought about the quick look to Davis. Instead, they put it ahead to Bortenstein.
Yeah, he really looks so confident with the disc. I know there's a throwing error there, but every time he has the disc in his hands, I feel confident that they're going to have a completion.
Here's O'Connor. O'Connor looking to go into the backfield. And able to get the break is Bloodgood. Bloodgood with Davis on him.
And this is why these players are out there for DC almost. A lot of these players are defensive line players, so they should be competent putting pressure on and getting the disc back.
And that's a frustrating call there. It looks like Bartenstein just couldn't stop himself in time running into O'Connor. And then O'Connor yelling at his cutters downfield to make more options. So here's Bryce Dunn. We're going to see some athleticism from Dunn. And Dunn with 3 black shirts. Again, none of the black shirts, if you will, really had a good play on the disc, but Dunn still getting the highlight reel catch, making it 13-9.
Yeah, there were a couple opportunities there for DC to get a block or two, but here they take the deep look into triple coverage essentially, but he had already beaten the triple coverage. He was back deeper than them. They didn't have the opportunity to catch up, went up early. None of the DC defenders had an opportunity.
So that gives the Spinners back the 4-goal lead, and we still have had only 1 break in this third quarter, though, Dusty, and that was the Callahan by David Brandoff.
Well, I think that was actually a hold as well. It just seemed like it was a break because they ended up on defense. They turned it over on that Glazer little backhand that just was subpar for his standards. To go back to the foul there that happened, O'Connor was not actually yelling at the guy who was marking him. He was yelling at the players downfield.
Right.
Just, nice to clear that up a little bit. Not too much animosity between these two teams, even though on the field, that's all there is.
Here's the Current. Ferraro's the one who grabs the pull. Then to Salmi, back to Ferraro, just picking up those free yards. And you see what the wind did there, just pushing it down on what should have been an easy pass to Flores. Then Davis here on the near side. Davis always wants to fake that flick huck downfield. Instead, it's going to be Gibson. Some pretty nice in-cuts there from Gibson in the last 2 points. Salmi hustling his way into the end zone, and Solis will look for him.
It's a tight spot here. This is another one.
And it looks like losing his footing was Gibson. And that's what allowed Greg Martin to get what will be another block.
Not only losing his footing, but that throw itself was into a very tight area in a situation that DC's offense keeps having to cobble something together late in the stall count rather than maintaining control and dominating this Philadelphia Spinners defense.
Flow and rhythm can be so important offensively. As Bryant and Greg Martin able to scoop it up, playing the garbage D there.
There might have been a foul there. I'm not really sure, but Philadelphia is maintaining possession, maintaining control right now.
Nick Patel, and he'll turn it over.
It's a quite optimistic throw. That needed to float a little bit more. I'm not sure if he was afraid of the wind or what.
And if Bryant was at full speed, Bryant would have to have been double as fast as we saw him on that cut.
Or would have had a layout immediately as soon as it was thrown.
Speaking of a layout, there's Patrick Lindsay, but he doesn't get to it as Delwico Johnson on the sideline here. Another high stall count and another turnover for DC.
I think Gibson might have gotten his hand on that, which is almost a miracle. It's just ugly here from DC right now. They get trapped on the sideline. They don't know how to get back off of it, and they throw it right back onto the sideline the moment they see a little breathing space.
At this point, about 1 minute and 45 seconds already. Here's Peck now looking a little more controlled. Peck floating it up, lofting it to Patrick Lindsay, and Delwico Johnson can't catch up in time. And you can see that the DC current players, you can tell that the depth and the fatigue and the heat, now it's starting to pay dividends for the Spinners. 14-9 in this contest.
It's just that crossfield throw. Martin gets a little piece of it, but I don't think Gibson would have had a chance to catch it, even if it came all the way through clean. And Martin just making an excellent catch there to maintain possession. This throw from Peck, he was able to collect himself, and Lindsay had already beaten Johnson by a couple of yards, maybe even 5 early on. So Peck could see the cut develop, kind of choose which way he wanted to throw it out there. The current on the mark there could have jumped out in front, but that could be overcommitting as well.
And Dustin, we saw Peck's throw. How important is it to square your shoulders to where you want to throw the disc?
It depends on how much space the mark is giving you, but in that opportunity, there was no pressure for the mark. So he had an opportunity to set his feet, didn't even necessarily have to step to throw that. It was very calm and composed, which is what we generally see from him. But without any pressure, it's that much easier.
Casey with the pull. Downfield. And picking up is DePaula. DePaula over to Bellinger.
Bellinger was specifically not throwing to Moses there open on the front. Instead, he'll go up to Webster there.
And then in the middle of the field to Moses. Moses was the man who was poached, so that's the way they got their 30 yards there.
Moses still hasn't been picked up.
Gravender with the scuba back, and then the unorthodox give and go between Moldenauer and Gravender. Now they're just, again, continuing to work the 1-2 before Moldenauer into the end zone. And Moses, he was the key on that play. You see Michael Moses gets the goal at the end of it, and it's 14-10. Moses still pretty confused out there. The referees, looks like the referee on the near side may have said something to him about the excessive celebration, but I didn't see too much of anything there.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what that was all about. But the thing was, Moses was open for that entire point. The first time he was covered was when he got into the end zone and eventually scored. I'm not sure if the current as a whole aren't recognizing what they need to do or what the defense is doing, or if Moses didn't know how to take advantage of the fact that he was totally uncovered for that point.
And you can actually see that Moldenauer immediately talking to Moses about that, because even though they got the score, DC know that that point didn't necessarily go exactly the way they would have liked it to.
Yeah, this is what being teammates is you figure it out, you have a little bit of moment of frustration or whatever, you get the goal, and you work forward to make it a better offense next time.
And Kevin Moldenauer does know a little thing or two about coaching some of these players that have been with the program for a little while.
It's a nice pull, set up pretty softly, but I'm not seeing DC commit to getting down on these pull plays right away.
So Bear was the one who collected it, and Hiranet takes it right back to Bear on the near side.
Meta was actually open on his first cut there, but it may have been on a break side or a little tough throw that Philadelphia doesn't want to risk anything. If they can maintain possession for the rest of this game, they'll win.
Bear from Radums. Now Meta. He's got height. He's got the room on Cobb, and so he gets the sky.
That's tough for Cobb. He was in good, solid position there. He had the inside route, but the long arm of Meta reaches over and snatches this disc from being a D and makes it just another goal for Philadelphia instead.
And you can't tell me that height doesn't, again, also play an effect in this one.
I'll tell you, Cobb and Meta actually got to the disc at the exact same time. So the fact that one was going in to catch it and the other was going to smack it may have been an issue. We saw that last week between the Stags and the Whitecaps, where a play in the end zone, Woodside is going up to smack the disc rather than catch it.
Right.
And Kitrosh Snell puts his hand on the disc, almost closes it. I couldn't tell if it was a strip or not. But the delay from Woodside, or in this case from Cobb, where you're trying to hit the disc instead of catch it, that means you have to rear back a little bit and load your arm to go forward. If you just go up and catch it, it takes one less motion.
So that is the second goal of the game for Himalaya Meta, as he continues to work his way up the gold leaderboard.
We're still seeing these mixed lines from DC. I'm sure this is one of the things they talked about in the half, and they'll have 36 seconds to score here, and Philadelphia is sitting 3 players 50 yards away from the disc right now.
Current still down by 5. Salmi to Ferraro. Ferraro, and the layout block there by Esser at full extension. So Esser now looking for the bookends. Esser in the end zone. He'll have to lay out again, and he couldn't get to it. So now that's about 15 seconds off the clock, where we really just basically got to watch Matthew Esser run around.
And there's another drop here. Philadelphia's going to have 10 seconds to score. They're going to try to get this break, and instead they're going to call a timeout right away. That first turnover from DC, that's the sort of thing that they have to know is coming. Philadelphia's been setting up to try to get those underblocks over and over again, and that time they got one.
And so the players, again, the heat taking effect, so we will take a break as well with 9 seconds remaining in the third quarter. Dan Hilton and Dusty Rhodes back on MOU Live. Again, thanks for joining us, as we again want to thank our sponsors, as Innova is proud to support Major League Ultimate and its incredible athletes. As the official disc of the MOU, the Innova Pulsar has quickly become the disc of choice at Ultimate's highest level. Visit InnovaDisc.com to find a dealer near you. The Spinners up 15-10 with 8 seconds remaining. And Dusty, do you like that timeout there? Again, you have 8 seconds. You're 1 throw away from the end line and end zone, and you do have the time and you do have the space.
Well, I didn't get as clear a look as the field state as we went into that timeout. If Philadelphia had a quick opportunity to just get a break right away, then it's a bad timeout call. But instead, it seems like they're going to set something up better. This is the play from Esser. He was moving while the receiver was just sort of standing stationary, and that's on the thrower. The thrower has to see that player behind the receiver and know either where he can put it so that Esser can't get a bid, or he has to not throw that, maybe even give a pump fake so that Esser bids all the way in, and then they can use that aggression against him, as we mentioned earlier. This is the throw again where Meta makes this excellent catch, but Cobb gets up early and gets up to the right space. But again, the long arm of Meta, that length really makes a difference both in, let's say, basketball as well as Ultimate.
And speaking of basketball, rumor has it David Brandoff, the man you see there, he is maybe 5'6", 5'7" in cleats, but yet word on the street and in the Philadelphia Spinners locker room is that he's a pretty savvy basketball player as well.
I can verify that. He's almost impossible to cover.
As David Brandoff here, just an easy throw into the middle of the field for Billy Sickles. Sickles into Pana, and then Pana throws it up as time expires, and Glazer for the first goal for Matt Glazer of the day. Yeah. He's one of the lead leaguers in goals, and he finds himself in the end zone, 16-10 now in favor of the Spinners.
Yeah, and Glazer was totally uncovered there. I'm really not sure what the defensive set was there for DC. They seem to have 3 players on the front end of the end zone and just one guy over there to deal with both Hiernett and Glazer. I'm not sure what the plan there was. I'm not sure where they were looking for a defense there, but the Current get that break to send us into the fourth quarter.
We have to mention as well the scoreboard on the opposite side of the field, so someone from the sideline telling Pana he would have to throw it up in a hurry. Well, we'll throw it back and be back in just a second as 16-10, the Spinners lead the Current after 3 quarters of action.
The team dynamic is just to have as much fun as possible.
It's an experience, man. You turn around and you look and there's this big giant animal running towards you.
When I first started commentating, it was kind of tough for me because it's like, well, I can be out there too. I can play with these guys. Why am I up here in the booth?
Jeff Brand he's a freaking monster. He can sort of just do it all, you know?
A few of my students were like, we saw you on the bus. I was like, I don't ride the bus. No, you're on the side of the bus.
Back at Cary Stadium, Dan Hilton and Dusty Rose, 16-10. The Spinners lead the DC Current. The Spinners well on their way, just 10 minutes away from qualifying for the postseason. Again, then they want to fight with the Boston Whitecaps for home field advantage. As we get a look there at Billy Sickles. As David Randolph throws it up here to Billy Sickles, and a former Rookie of the Year winner, and he has an assist in every game so far this year, Dusty.
Yeah, he's a tough cover downfield to start with, but he's also the sort of player that if you give him an opportunity, he's going to deliver assists to his teammates. A lot of times they put up deep shots to him that are short of the end zone, so he gets that sort of short warning track assist after making the play downfield. Here, we've seen him in the end zone a number of times. Maybe he's wondering if we're talking about him right now. He knows as he works in the MLU office, he's kind of familiar with how we do these things, so maybe he's got a second sense about it.
Well, Billy Sickles maybe has a second sense for the disc as well, as he does lead the Spinners in points with 27, with Matt Glazer fighting with him at 25.
By the way, I hope he's got more than two senses. I seem to have misspoken there. A sixth sense would be helpful. A second sense is something like touch or smell or something along those lines.
So understanding our broadcast and knowing where the disc is 1 and 2, and then, of course, smell, taste, and sight, of course. You don't need the others.
These are the MLU senses, not just your normal human senses. Some of the ways that the plays that are made out here, it's almost a superhuman sort of thing. The catches that are made down low, the catches that are made up high. Now we've got folks jumping over Esser on the sidelines. He's a sturdy guy, so if you surprise him, you'll still get enough support to get over the top. And I don't know how he cleared the mohawk on top was the key, though.
Well, you can just see, Dusty, the different disposition from both these teams on the sideline, with the Spinners, again, having fun, enjoying it, preparing themselves, again, being up by 6, which so far we've seen of the history of the league, 6 in the fourth quarter can be an almost insurmountable number.
You can make up that time.
It's possible.
But you have to make some incredible plays, and your offense has to score quickly over and over and over again. If the DC offense during this fourth quarter can spend 20 seconds, 30 seconds on each offensive point, that'll be a much better place for them.
Well, again, they were missing Blake with 7 goals, 21 assists, the only player on the Current to have completed more than 200 passes and has 1.5 touches per offensive possession, just to tell you how important Blake was coming into this game to the Current offense.
And that's a structural thing with DC, where they really try to use the talents of the players that they have. Blake was the player this year who got all of the touches. Philadelphia and Boston, on the other hand, are two teams that don't seem to have a central player who gets all the goals or all of the assists or anything like that. And that can prove for them to be a little more resilient if one of their players goes down with an injury.
Salmi with the pull. The Spinners, of course, will start on offense, so they will be able to make it a 7-point game if they can score here. Randolph had a little bit of trouble with the pull, but again, Dusty, the Current not coming down in the droves defensively. So Dave Baer able to get up to about 35 yards off his own end zone. Racing downfield is Radums. Radums almost tried to get a second attempt on it, but it looks like Salmi again bodied him enough where the players collide and slowing the second attempt.
And it seemed like the disc dropped down again there right near once it got to the players, where Radums was going up as if it was going to be 12 feet off the ground or so.
What a beautiful catch there. Meta with the layout, and Meta a little shaken up as well. It was Gabe Webster, and Gabe Webster has made a number of highlight reel plays today.
This was a fantastic catch under pressure because Meta thought he was going to get the inside route here, gets his hand out all the way in front. Webster manages to pull it up from underneath. I'm not even sure if Meta got his hand on that and then Webster managed to pull it up, but that was a really tight play and very good focus by Webster.
And so Meta able to easily walk off under his own power.
He's a little frustrated that he didn't get the block there, but I'm not sure he can criticize himself so much as he should just credit his opponent for making an excellent catch.
That also the first catch of the day for Gabe Webster, and what a catch to have here in the fourth quarter. A fourth quarter where the DC Current again have picked up the disc. They could get a break here to bring it back within 5, and that's what they'll have to do in a hurry, as you mentioned, Dusty. Here's DePaula, a high stall count. Now Webster up ahead, back to Moses. Moses, one throw away.
He's got that inside lane, but there's no one there.
And it looks like we might have a stall out.
We've got a pick first, it seems, so we're going to go back, but DC will probably maintain possession as the pick was called before the turnover was thrown.
And that's what Katzenbach was having the conversation with the official nearest midfield.
This is one of the things where we talk about continuation. There should be negative continuation as well, although the stall is going to come in at 5 or so.
So Moses into Salmi. So now the whistles blow again.
I don't think that play was whistled live yet, so the play never happened. They're going to lose another 10 yards. It's going to come back in on 5 again. You have to wait for the whistle before you make the first throw.
Current have to have something set up here. Instead, they go deep to Gravender, and the wind decided that they didn't want it to come back in bounds. You can see he was trying to bring it outside in.
Yeah, it was going to be a tough throw into a small area with a small receiver covered by possibly the biggest player in this game in Radams. Not sure why that was the setup for them, but there was an opportunity to throw that goal.
There's Glazer to that man, Radams. He'll dump back to Bear. You see Radams trying to control the middle of the field just like we saw Jake Rainwater do for so long for the Philadelphia Spinners.
Yeah, that's one of the players I miss watching for the Spinners. He was a joy. He was always popping open at the most interesting times.
Looks like a hand block there on David Brandoff, and he should know a thing about that. His hand block earlier in the game did again gift the Spinners probably what was the play of the game in the Callahan.
And although this is a negative possession a couple times here for Philadelphia, they're taking so much time off the clock right now. It's almost 3 minutes gone in this quarter.
Bellinger to Salmi, and just really moving laterally, as you mentioned. Horizontally across the field as opposed to vertically. Bellinger ahead to Moses. Moses almost traveled. Instead, they get it to DePaula. DePaula. Meta again. Not Meta, excuse me, but Bryce Dunn with a layout D. And Webster able to hang off the man. Here's Moses waiting for the cut. The hand blocked by Trey Katzenbach. And a turnover after the DC Current, we'll say, wasted their own time.
Yeah.
Just about 2 minutes have gone by for this point. We have yet to see a score in the fourth quarter.
And that was a good hand block by Katzenbach, but Moses didn't commit to getting a good break there. Instead, he tried to toss up something a little lazily over the top, and Katzenbach was ready for it. Now we get a timeout from the Spinners.
And you see the DC Current again dealing with fatigue after 3.5 minutes of the same play. And there's again that block by Katzenbach.
Moses needed to go low there with the break. Katzenbach's hand was already up high. He didn't even move it down low with the little fake.
So with 6:32 remaining, the Spinners will have the disc when we come back, up 16-10.
That was an incredible game to watch.
It was a huge loss.
I just decided to launch and try to get it.
I knew if I went up early enough, I could get it.
And all of a sudden, there are feet kind of above heads.
Does it all come back to this loss? Does it all come back to this play?
If I had 4 hands, I would put all 4 hands on it.
It was up the O-line. They had to deliver.
Boston kept doing this thing that we didn't think was possible.
.87 degrees and a little bit windy here in Fort Washington, Pennsylvania, but the Spinners don't seem to be bothered too much. They're up 16-10, and they've got the disc back after we have yet to see a score here in the fourth quarter, so that makes it a 3-minute, 28-second point here. And for both offenses and both defenses is, again, every time the offense turns the disc over, again, sometimes it could be a throwaway, but generally you have to credit the defense as well.
Yeah, the thing here is that there have been opportunities for DC's offense to get the disc off of this sideline again, but the players are a little hesitant to either throw the big swing or to throw that little inside break. And as a result, they got stuck over here, threw a couple turnovers, and we're just at the point now where Philadelphia has just about waited out this clock enough that DC will not have an opportunity to get back in this game. Now, Philadelphia's going to come back out on offense. Yeah, it's great to get a goal here, but if they turn the disc over and they can make DC just work it back and forth across the field again, they'll cement their victory.
So some odd subplots here. The DC Current, again, as we mentioned, fighting against injuries, fighting against the Spinners, and fighting against the clock. The Spinners, for themselves, really fighting at this point against ending this game in the right frame of mind where they can continue to try to rack up the victories and get home field advantage against the Boston Whitecaps in the playoffs. So there's Arcata, the double team coming, and a high stall count, so he did not panic, and he dumped it back to Pana. Pana up to Esser. Shields working hard on this near sideline, eventually clearing out, allowing Esser to take the deep look. There's Pana.
DC's doing a good job on defense here. They're committing a second player to some of these deep looks, so Philadelphia isn't taking them, and they're staying tight downfield.
And finally they do take it, and Arcata was the man to pull it in, just about 10 yards away from the end zone. Back to Bryant. It's only the first time he's touched the disc this point. It's been Ethan Peck who's been in the middle of things. Shields as well. Here comes Shields on the dump. There's Hiranet working the 1-2 with Peck. And now Panna looks to be the man in the end zone. The layout is not in time, and Panna finally pulls it in. So the timeout working to great effect for the Spinners. They really have put, would you call it not necessarily the nail in the coffin with 5:32 remaining, up by 7.
Very much so. This game is getting out of hand for the DC Current now. It's a 7-point lead, 5.5 to go. Panna scoring there easily. Miner wasn't able to keep up with Peck on the up line cut. Moldenhauer wasn't able to keep up with Panna in the end zone. As we talked about before, the fatigue has to be playing a factor right now as we see the Current lagging behind both on offense and on defense.
And the Current having to put their offensive talents back out time and time again. And a lot of those athletes you mentioned have been playing major points this game. And that's what the Rumble do quite often. We talk about some of the guys who played the most points in the league. Sean Mott near the top. Lloyd Blake, of course, as well, near the top of that list. But as far as league leaders in offensive points played, you talk about some of the guys in Vancouver, but then Scott Zoo and Sean Mott. And for defensive points, Matt Weintraub. And again, if you're on defense so often, you just have to continue to put those same players out.
And the toughest part is, as you were talking about with Vancouver, they're always on offense this season. They've been giving up so many breaks that they have to put those players out over and over and over again.
Here's Davis. That wind allowing Patel to knock it down.
Yeah, the wind brought it right back across the field, but Davis didn't throw that confidently. In a wind like this, you have to throw with force and with power. You can't just set it up.
And Dusty, is it a misnomer that you have to release low in the wind, or do you just have to release with enough force no matter where you release it?
That is absolutely correct. That's one of those things that I can't stand hearing from people, is that in the wind you have to throw low. If you're a competent enough thrower, you can release the disc at any height. You just have to understand the wind, get enough rotation on the disc, and throw with power rather than trusting those throws that will work in indoor or work in non-windy situations.
Patel trusting the angle and power of the disc. And Martin will have to try to run it down, but Martin didn't even get a bid out. And we know Greg Martin is a man who would love to get a bid out there on the turf in the end zone, but again, too far from Patel.
A foot shorter or a little bit more float, and I'm going to tell you that I think Martin was going to catch that. He got even closer to that one than I expected him to, but the fact that the turnover is all the way down here is just making it even that much more difficult for DC to get back down the field.
So the Current try to give it right back. Gibson, the 50-50 disc up in the air. Gibson on the second attempt against Casey. So then Gibson going cross-field to Davis. This one didn't float the way they would have liked to, and looks like Patrick Lindsay and Davis, and they're going to call the goal. They say it a 50-50, go to the offense. Antoine Davis did everything he had to do. He had two spinners who had better position on the disc, and somehow Antoine Davis pulled it in.
It's one of those things where Dom Gibson did what he does early on here. He's made a number of second opportunity catches over the course of the season, turns upfield, sees who his receiver is, and says, yeah, I trust that guy to go up for it. I'm going to put it up here because time is not on our sides right now.
And that's why Gibson, normally playing on the defensive line, he moves over to the offensive line because you want guys, in case you turn the disc over, to be able to get the disc back. In this case, they didn't have to do that, but having Gibson and Davis out there, you can see what they can do athletically.
And we've seen a lot of Davis, Gibson, and Delrico Johnson all on the same line today. Here we see the focus after the first initial D. We put the disc up, and this is an opportunity for Davis to show what he can do. You know, that was close enough that I think Lindsay may have actually caught the disc first, but I'm not in the position to tell. That's the ref's job, and they call it a tie.
And it seemed like before any of those 4 feet touched the ground, the disc was in both men's hand. I think that might have been what the referees were seeing.
It was so close that it's difficult to tell, and the tie goes to the offense, so if there's any doubt, that's a goal.
Here's the half-field pull. Bellinger releases. See if he can get it to touch in the back of the end zone, and it does.
Not only that, he knocked the pylon over. That's a perfect midfield pull. He's going to pin them all the way in the corner here. I want to see what DC does.
So Dave Baer, of course, they're going to bring the double team. And then Baer has it tipped. It looked like it was Apollo who had earlier given away a Callahan. So almost trying to get one back. Not necessarily a Callahan, but it is a turnover with 4 minutes remaining.
And the clock actually hasn't started on this point at all. It has not started in any way. So DC's getting a little away cooking right now.
So it will be Salmi who starts right on that near side pylon.
And now the clock just started. That's good for DC.
With Hironet on him. And nobody in that space. So they get it back to Bellinger. And then Salmi. Bellinger again losing his footing. Losing so many yards here on the Current.
They'll get a little more space on offense when they move back like this, but it's not usually to the advantage to move back.
There's Moses. And Moses just able to get it and not into the end zone.
Good defense by Philadelphia here.
And finally into the end zone is Webster. Again, shaky. We talked about it. It did wind up being advantageous for the Current to dump things all the way back as far as they did.
And they got so much extra time there. That entire point only took 38 seconds.
38 seconds.
We might get a look at a clock adjustment here from the refs. But at that point, it should have been a lot more time, as the disc is in play as soon as they put it into play at the back corner there. Good defense on the DC Current's part. Good mark on Dave Bear in the corner. It was a very tough situation to get out of.
So all credit there goes again to the pull to start the play.
Indeed. I was afraid it was going to be out of bounds at first, but he painted the corner there. It bounced, hit the pylon. Then they were in a good position.
So with 3:22 remaining, it might be too much time for the Current to come back, but they have given their best effort here in the fourth quarter of action. We'll see if they can continue to make a comeback here late on MLU Live. Back here, Dan Hilton and Dusty Rhodes on MLU Live. 17-12 the score. The Spinners over the Current, but the Current, they're on a 2-goal streak with 3:22 remaining.
Here we'll get a look at some of the plays that Davis made. This was early in the first quarter. It's a nice anticipatory bid there against Glazer. And a nice, simple, easy inside break. And here we'll get a look at that last one. Wow, that is such a tight play. The fact that Davis was even able to get a hand on that is proof positive that he's a player to contend with in this league.
You talk about the players in this league. The likes of Greg Martin that we've highlighted so far, 22 years young, as well as Antoine Davis, both 22 years old, again, both rising stars in this league. And with the MLU, sometimes, again, with a lot of turnover with rosters from year to year, getting younger necessarily for, well, at least in the case of the Rumble, where it does make you more inexperienced. In the case of Spinners and the Current, where they've had the same core year after year after year, sometimes getting younger can help.
Yeah, it's an advantage that you have when you are planning for not just this season, but for the seasons in the future. You give your teams experience. You give your individual players more experience playing at this level. And while there's not a single coach in this league who would mortgage this season for the future, the correct way is to try to get those players an advantage. So you're not just building a team this time, you're trying to build towards a dynasty. You're trying to build so that you dominate the whole league, the entire division.
And, of course, we do, again, have to give credit to, we talk about the New York Rumble, what they're doing, again, to ambitiously take on a rebuilding project like they did. We've seen players like, again, Scott Zoo was with the Rumble in previous years, but he's taking a larger role. And Sean Mott has been one of the stars of the league with highlight play after highlight play. And those are the guys that can flourish when, again, you have to do what you will call a little bit of a rebuilding project.
It's not even that. Marquez Brownlee has played a much bigger role this season, getting more and more blocks. We showed the capability to do that earlier. But his ability to open up the defense and take the top off the defense as a thrower, deliver some of those deep shots to Mott, where Mott will get a step on someone. Brownlee will see it and deliver such beautiful backhands all the way downfield. They are building something together for the future of the Rumble, and it's also going to benefit them in the club seasons. A lot of those guys play together on Garden State, and they're working out a lot of the kinks, trying to see where each of their players has those singular strengths that you want to use going forward.
So looking towards the MLU future, though, it looks nearer and nearer, 3:22 remaining, where the Philadelphia Spinners and the Boston Whitecaps will be barreling towards a matchup in the postseason just a few short weeks away. So, again, for the Spinners, constantly having the Whitecaps in the back of your head, not necessarily trying to think about last year, but looking towards the future, you want to host here.
Well, not only that, the Whitecaps are going to be going on the road for one of those 2-game-in-a-weekend road trips.
Right.
And that'll be telling to see how their season plays out. If they drop one of those games, or if they blink at some point, Philadelphia seems so determined and so aggressive in the way that they've played this season. They're just waiting for the Whitecaps to take another misstep. The other misstep was, of course, when they lost to Philadelphia. I wouldn't necessarily characterize that as a misstep on the Whitecaps' part, but a very strong early season win for the Spinners.
And it's 1-1, and again, we have to mention the Spinners just 1 point away from being still undefeated on the season after losing by 1 point in overtime 2 weeks ago to the Whitecaps. But again, that was a millennium ago in MOU time, as here's Hironette again in his own end zone. Another good pull from midfield, that time by the Current. So Nick Hironette just jacks it down deep, but Billy Sickles has a few steps on Healy, and so Sickles may have been fouled as well.
Yeah, he already made the catch there, though, and calling the foul there is actually going to slow the offense down. He didn't seem too perturbed about it either. Healy really didn't have a play on there. He made an effort to get back into it, but Sickles' body is difficult to get around. He always puts himself in the right spot.
So Panna into the end zone for Glazer. Now Glazer padding those late stats. Now 2 goals for Matt Glazer with 2:32 remaining in the fourth quarter.
That was a high stall situation where Hironette saw that there was an isolated player downfield, in this situation Sickles, and rather than taking a short pass around in the end zone where there's an opportunity for a Callahan, he unleashes it downfield. There's no one else within 40 yards of these two players. And Sickles had enough steps to get downfield and maintain advantage over Healy. Here we get the simple goal from Panna to Glazer. Panna is one of those players who has been distributing assists all season for the Spinners. And Glazer, as we talk about every time, he's always moving. He's always ready to take advantage of any little miscue from the defense.
For Philadelphia this season, when we talk about Michael Panna, there might be a little bit of a changing of the guard in terms of the sheer number of points and the wealth of points, where Nick Hironette this year, coming into the game, only 2 goals, 7 assists. Kazenbach, 1 goal, 1 assist coming into this game at least. Glazer had come in with 18 and 6, Sickles 11 and 13. That just tells you how much more those two take on the offense.
And it's those two are sort of, we talked about early in the season, who's going to make up for Rainwater not being there. It's multiple players downfield taking charge of that. They have some very strong cutters for the Spinners.
Furrow with the throwaway, gave it right back to the Spinners. So Ethan Peck, one of the league leaders in break point assists, and there's another one to Matthew Esser. Now 19-12, 2-14, and so it looks like the DC Current have taken their foot off the gas a little bit, and the Current did, and the Spinners continue to roll.
Yeah, and based on what I've seen over the course of this season, there's no chance during the rest of this game that the Spinners are going to lighten up. They're going to try to get break after break after break and just pile on the points here.
They are a league-leading plus 39, as you mentioned, Dusty, and they're best in defensive scoring efficiency. So the numbers do tell you that this will be an ugly 2-14 for the DC Current.
What DC has to do now is, while it seems like they're definitively going to be eliminated from playoff contention unless they can make an 8-point run or a 7-point run with 2 minutes remaining, what they need to do is focus in. And what is it that they came into this game to do? They came in to play a good game of Ultimate.
Right.
So you put your players out there. You're being challenged by the conditions. You're being challenged mentally by being down in this game that you know you're going to lose. What can you do next? What positives can you individually make with your teammates while you're out on the field to play?
Well, speaking of positive, Bartonstein has had a pretty positive game here, and so here, another highlight reel play for Dorico Johnson, and so used to it, and there's the dance afterwards. As 3 players in front of him collide, he let his teammate Antoine Davis do the dirty work of going up early with the 2 Spinners players, and so Dorico Johnson was there to clean it up.
And I'll tell you, on this throw, if you can see the way Davis is taking off here and just making everyone else near him look slow, he caught up to that disc, drawed in 2 defenders, as you mentioned. Enrico just found the disc in front of him, made the easy clap catch. Now we're going to get to see an opportunity for DC to make a defensive play. They've got Johnson out there playing both ways now, and it's another moment where you get an opportunity to make a play on the field. It all matters. You don't get an infinite amount of time to play Ultimate.
And again, while they are eliminated from postseason play with a loss, for DC, one of the positives you can look at, would you say this was a coming out party, if you will, for Bartonstein?
Oh, absolutely. He's impressed me over the course of this game. You can hear me talking about it over and over again. He just looks so confident and calm with the disc, and not every Ultimate player has the ability to do that under pressure.
And he was a mid-season pickup by the DC Current. He did not start on the opening day roster. So the DC Current able to find one of those diamonds in the rough, like the Spinners have done so many times with the likes of Greg Martin and Ethan Peck as well this season. As the Spinners uncharacteristically turn it over right near the end zone. There's Bellinger to Gibson, and that's how you want to score. Want to score quickly, and so while the Current, they look to be down and out, they scored twice in a matter of about 15 seconds to make it, again, a 5-point game.
And that's the sort of play that you have to rely on to make any comeback. Yes, while you're going to get some defensive plays, you need the offense to make a couple miscues and then score right away. Gibson was aware of what had happened behind him. There was no one quick enough to get back into the defense to stop him. And the thrower, Bellinger, knew the state of the field and was confident just putting the disc up in front. Now we're down to a 5-point game with 1:50 left. But if you can get another 12-second score, you can continue getting 12-second scores. You will get back into this game.
As we are under 2 minutes to play, so the Current will have to continue to hurry, down by 5. Whatever formula they have used for the last about minute and a half has worked to good effect. Delwico Johnson will be the man to huck the disc down, and the wind this time helping him out a little bit. Katzenbeck will have to pick up. He gets it ahead to Bear. Bear with DePaulo on him, and there's Pana. Gibson coming to him again. A difficult mark for Pana, and there is the D as Meta calling and asking for a foul.
DC has to score almost immediately on the first throw here.
They get one throw ahead to Delwico Johnson, and he lofts it in to Moses, who's able to get a shoestring catch. Don't look now, but now just a minute and 32 seconds by my count, and 3 goals, 1 hold, and 2 breaks by the DC Current.
I'm not entirely sure this disc is up. Moses did the best that he could to get there. Delwico Johnson delivered a kind of a poor throw. No, that definitely was up. It was up by about 1 millimeter. That's a fantastic chase down by Moses. Johnson, on the other hand, could have made it a little easier on him.
And so often, though, Dusty, you see that a player will get his hand underneath the disc. I mean, the best way to keep a disc off the ground is to put your hand in between the disc and the ground. But that time, he actually grabbed it from the top part of the disc.
There was no opportunity. The extra distance, the 10 or so inches to get his hand underneath the disc, that would have been too far for his body to travel without learning a little materialization, a little transportation.
Right.
Teleportation was the word I was looking for. That took me 3 chances to get it right. Jeez.
So after all of that, the DC Current starting to find their rhythm, but a little bit too late. And imagine this game if the DC Current had found their rhythm like this somewhere in that third quarter.
Well, they've got to average less than 20 seconds per goal if they want to get a tie in this game. So there's 1:25 left. They need 4 scores before they run out of time.
And if you're Philadelphia, you have to think they're going to try to, with O'Connor here pulling it in, try to just wind that clock down, but padding the goals as well could end this game. Davis, 50-50 ball with Radams, so Radams was the man to pull it in.
It's a late bid, but it was a good job by Davis not to make a bunch of contact coming through there. Down to about a minute now.
There's Shields, and Radams wide open downfield, the Current being aggressive on the mark. So then Radams into the end zone for Matt Glazer, and again, Matt Glazer, 3 goals, but 2 of them coming very, very late in this contest.
And Glazer in that situation just finding the opportunity where a warning track huck went up and Glazer's in pursuit as Field is left alone with two offensive players to contend with. Radams was totally uncovered there. I know you have to make a gamble as the Current go, but you also need to recover back downfield and help the defender out.
I want to compliment Matt Glazer. How often have you seen him have to sprint in this game, Dusty?
Well,
so often he's just in the end zone.
That's what I'm going to say. I can't even tell if he's sprinting most of the time. He moves down the field quickly with long strides, and it doesn't. Even when he's moving at a high rate of speed, it doesn't look like he's putting so much effort forth. It makes it easy to chase down.
And again, if you're a cutter and a young cutter as well, you watch some MOU tape and you want to be a cutter. Matt Glazer is a pretty good example on where to put yourself in the right positions. He doesn't necessarily use a physical body. He doesn't necessarily body guys, but he's always in the right place at the right time.
Oh, I'll tell you this from experience. If you get up close to Glazer and try to body him, he knows how to deal with that because people have been trying to do that to him
for years.
The whole time he's been playing.
Yep. Here's again another huck. This time is Bartenstein again. And going up for it, and just getting enough of it was Bryce Dunn. I think he may be the one awarded with the D. Wickens was on it as well, and there's Wickens. Over to the far sideline, for Gabe Colton. Now Patel with 30 seconds remaining.
And you can see that Philadelphia here wants to score, but they're probably content to work it a little bit and not rush. However, they love attacking after the break so much.
Beautiful catch by Moldenauer across the middle. Now see if the Current can get one back.
It's a perfectly timed block by Moldenauer.
And Bartenstein was there. He offered up so many assists to his teammates. So, again, let's complete his coming out party here with a goal.
Yeah, it was good for him to get on the board there. Good for him to help out Moldenhauer after that block happened. But the ability for Moldenhauer to read the offense and find enough space to make this block, it's excellent. We even see him here on the corner of the screen. Reaches out, just catches the very edge of that, just with a forefinger and a thumb. Not even a whole hand on the catch. Excellent hands.
With 10 seconds remaining, up by 4, the Spinners over the curtain. So, Dusty, would you say that for young players, maybe you do some finger exercises as well as all that running and sprinting as well?
100%. Do fingertip push-ups. If you look up what mountain climbers do, or if you start taking up climbing a little bit on your own, one of the best things you can do is try doing a little bit of climbing before a practice or before you go throw. Your forearms will be entirely exhausted.
Right.
And if you can throw in those scenarios and you can make your hands strong enough that you can hold yourself up by a finger or two, you're going to be well situated to throw and catch well in ultimate.
So with 10 seconds remaining, here Annette stops it, and so Brandoff will just pick it up.
Doesn't even necessarily have to pick it up. He has 10 seconds afterwards. Just going to walk out the clock here.
And so no throw, and the game comes to an end, and that means the Philadelphia Spinners have qualified for the 2016 MLU postseason. The DC Current, meanwhile, are eliminated from postseason contention as they fall to 2-5 on the season. Meanwhile, the Spinners move to a 6-1 record, best in the Eastern Conference. Again, they do have a game on the Whitecaps, as the Whitecaps do have a game in hand. As you mentioned, they have 2 games out on the road in a short little bit of time. But we will be back for just a second for the post-game wrap-up here on MLU Live. Back at Carey Stadium, Dan Hills and Dusty Rose on MLU Live. Philadelphia Spinners, they reach the postseason again, 20-16. They defeat the DC Current here and move to 6-1 on the season. And at this time, we are joined by one of the stalwarts of the defensive line for the Philadelphia Spinners, and that is Matthew Esser. And first question I have to ask you, from a team perspective, how excited are you guys to make the postseason once again?
We're pumped. We worked really hard so far this year, but it's definitely not over yet. We got to keep working in order to win this whole thing.
And Matt, one of our players to watch at the start of this game was Greg Martin. And of course, he could be a candidate for Rookie of the Year. You've got to work with him on that defensive line. What has he done so well this season, and especially in this game? Why do you guys trust him so much?
Greg is an animal. He can get up higher than anyone else. He is your definition of a professional athlete. He works out as a trainer. He works out every day, and he just gets up and has a great attitude as well on the field.
So tell us a little bit about what you guys do after the turns happen. So you attack so aggressively on offense after once you get a break opportunity.
A lot of it's mental. You're playing defense. You know that you are more athletic. You know that you can keep running. And after you get the break, that's when you actually start working. You run harder. You work harder than the opponents.
Speaking of just getting your work started, now that you know that you're going to be facing the Whitecaps in the postseason, how much are you looking forward to matching up with them in that scenario?
We're really excited. We let them slip through our fingers last time, but it's not going to happen again. That was like a reality call to us. We're now working out. We have workout logs going. We're working our butts off in order to come back and beat them.
I can tell you're so excited about what's going to go on here, but I got to ask you one slightly silly question. It looks like we've tamped down your hair there with the headset. Tell us a little bit about how you get such creative hairstyles every single time you come out here.
I have no idea how to answer that question. I just like to have fun with it. Yeah, I teach and pumps my kids up, and it pumps me up to play hard, you know?
That's excellent. Congratulations on your win.
Thanks a
We
lot.
look forward to seeing you in the postseason, and great work out there today.
Great. We're so excited. Thanks for being with us. Thanks to all our fans out there. You guys are the best.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Again, that was Matthew Esser of the Philadelphia Spinners, who moved to 6-1 with their 20-60 win over the DC Current. We'll be back for just a quick post-game wrap-up here on MLU Live. For one final time at Carey Stadium here on this Saturday at Fort Washington, Pennsylvania. 20-16, the final. Spinners make the postseason. DC Current, they fall out of postseason contention with this loss. And Dusty, so looking ahead, the season isn't over yet, though. The Boston Whitecaps still have to go down and have 2 road games, so something that all the other teams in the Eastern Conference have done. So looking ahead, how can the Philadelphia Spinners take advantage mentally and give themselves the advantage for the postseason?
All the Spinners have to do is keep doing what they've been doing all season. You saw the way Esser was excited about how their whole team's been training and preparing for this, and they've been thinking about that loss to the Whitecaps since last season. They'll have an opportunity to right it. The key for them is not to have to travel up to Boston. If they can stay steady and the Whitecaps blink, that game will be down here in Philadelphia.
So we will have, again, still plenty of action to go on this season. You can tune in next week and catch more great MLU action on MLU Live, of course, with the Philadelphia Spinners and the Boston Whitecaps barreling towards a postseason rematch. After last year, the Boston Whitecaps won in the Eastern Conference Final, went on to win the 2015 MLU Championship. Well, to wrap this one up, plenty of thanks go around for our director, Matt Gray, and our entire production staff, my color guy, Dusty Rhodes. I'm Dan Hilton. Again, have a wonderful day as the Philadelphia Spinners clinch the postseason.